Good evening, everybody. Today is August the 6th, 2018, and tonight is the Moscow City Regular Council meeting. Jim?
Won't you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
We will move on to the first order here, which is the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Catherine and a second by Art to approve the consent agenda as is. I'll start the roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 Okay. Item number 2, staff recognition report. Gary, do we have anything this evening?
Nothing this evening, Your Honor.
Okay. Item number 3, mayor's appointments, and I have none this evening, so we will move on to item number 4, which is public comment and mayor's response period that we limit to a total of 15 minutes, and so we let folks come up and tell us what's on their mind, as long as it is not on the agenda this evening and or in front of the Board of Adjustment or Planning and Zoning. Please state your name and address, and we will give you 3 minutes to tell us what is on your mind.
Hey, I'm Linda Pike, 1026 East 3rd Street, and this is a issue I brought up before, and Les is probably tired of hearing it, but it's the pedestrian crossing down there across, it's by Papa Murphy's, and that curve that you go around where Ambassador used to be, whatever that street is, that pedestrian crossing is just not visible. And I would really like to see something done to make it more visible before it starts getting darker and the students start coming back. I don't know what, we've suggested a cheap thing would be to have a flag that you could pick up and carry if you're crossing that crosswalk. But people just don't even realize there's a crosswalk there and it's a blind curve. So I would like some more attention put to that before winter. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. We have talked about that, Les. Have you got anything you'd like to add this evening?
Well, we have looked at it. The site distances actually do meet the standards. They feel short, but it's something we looked at very closely when that crosswalk was put in about 10 years ago, working with ITD. So it does meet the minimum requirements for sight lines. As I say, it feels short for most people, I think. We have talked about the possibility of adding flags, as Ms. Pike suggests. We're also looking at lighting in that area. It's lit, but not as well lit perhaps as it could be. And of course, as we're looking at adding lighting along that corridor as part of that pedestrian sidewalk safety improvement, that's part of the area we'll be looking at. It's not easy to get lights to that location just quickly, so it's something we will continue to work on.
Okay, thank you. Gary, do you
I
have
was just going to say, ITD, the district engineers, indicated that at those problematic intersections, such as the 8th Street intersection across from Gritman, this particular intersection, Peterson Drive, before that light was put in, they were very willing to set out some flags. Jim Carpenter, the former district engineer, said he would provide as many flags as we wanted. We've talked about talking to Dave Quisty about it, so we can renew those talks.
Yeah, I think that's something we should do. Thank you, Gary. Okay, others would like to come up and speak? Okay, we will move on, folks, to item number 5, which is a Citizens Commission report for Sustainable Environment Commission. We've got Tyler Palmer here, as well as Steve McGeehan. So, Tyler, I will let you take off on it.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, Council. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today for this. This is something that typically Kyle Steele, who is our staff liaison of the Sustainable Environment Commission, would be here, but he's actually taking his kids to see Mount Rushmore this week, and so he wasn't able to be with us. But this is This is a great one to be doing. The Sustainable Environment Commission is, I think, a really a great example of how well commissions can work, especially in a city like Moscow. We have a lot of very engaged citizens, and it's a really good way for the city to keep our finger on the pulse of the desires of the community, and to really engage with our citizens in a meaningful way. And we really have appreciated the interaction that we've had with the Sustainable Environment Commission, specifically through our environmental services group. I think it's pretty neat that a city the size of Moscow is committed enough to sustainability that we have an environmental services group. We have people that are dedicated to looking at all times at the sustainability of our operations. And we really have appreciated the work that the Sustainable Environment Commission does to help us understand what the concerns are of the community and help us work to answer the questions that we can answer and try and all work toward a more sustainable future for Moscow. So with that, I'll introduce Steve McGeehan, who is the chair of that commission, and I'll let him explain what they've been doing for this past year.
Hello, Steve.
Hello, Mayor Lambert, members of the council. Thank you for having me here tonight. It is a pleasure to, if I can figure out how to run this thing. Excellent. Grab the right button. To present the activities, kind of an update of what we've done over the last 12 months. As a reminder, and I think a great way to get started is what is the mission of the SEC? And it is to solicit the advice and information for sound environmental management practices, and in a nutshell, to promote health and safety for our citizens. That's really what we're all about. And so what I would like to spend a few minutes of your time doing is just giving you an update of what we've been doing. I'd like to, before I get started, recognize the volunteers. These are people, of course, it's a citizens commission that put the time in to show up for the meetings, and many of you, of course, recognize many of the people on that list there. And I want to make particular thanks to Kelly Cooper, our sustainability intern, Kyle Steele, as Tyler mentioned, as our staff liaison. He keeps us on the straight and narrow when we start meandering off what we're supposed to be doing. And then Brandy has been invaluable as the council liaison as we discuss some of these issues that I will present. So, meetings, we meet once a month. Unlike some commissions, we do meet throughout the summer. We seem to never run out of things to talk about. Gina's been on the council rep, she knows sometimes, and Art has too, of course. Yeah, we never run short of topics to discuss, and probably one of my biggest jobs as chair is to keep things reined in and on time and get us out of there before the clock strikes midnight. We meet downstairs in the mayor's conference room. I will go through some examples of agenda topics, but I get asked from time to time, how do we come up with these ideas? And many of them come from interested parties, people that want to be on the commission, have things that they're interested in, and so they bring those topics to us as members of the commission. We also are contacted by citizens, have questions and concerns, and so we follow through on those. We do have standing reports from Kelly Cooper, the sustainability technician. Elon Carter, I think it's kind of unique for a city commission to have a high school representative on there, and we've had that for years. It's rotated, of course, as the students graduate. Elon is our current member, and it's awesome to have it's amazing to me to have a high school kid show up in the evening and contribute, and Elon does, and before him was Mete Yuxel, if I pronounce his name correctly, and I find that quite refreshing and very, very valuable. We make a point to collaborate with other commissions, and you'll see some examples of that in the coming slides. And then we also have guest speakers that come in from time to time. An example of a guest speaker, Avista, Paul Kimmel, of course, most of you know. And energy sustainability is a huge issue, of course, for everybody, and it is a very important topic for the SEC to talk about. Paul's actually been in twice in the last year and presented this chart. I won't go through everything, but the idea here is, looking at Avista's energy portfolio. About half of it is renewable, and about half of it comes from gas and coal-powered power plants. And of course, one of the questions and points of discussion with Paul is, what does the future look like? Is there going to be more renewable? And the answer is refreshingly yes. Upper right-hand corner is a solar farm that is going in Lind, Washington. Unbelievably awesome project. It's neat to see that kind of thing, and it's happening throughout the country. Lower left is Colstrip, Montana. And of course, the question there is, what's this portfolio going to look like in the next 20 years? And I won't go through, of course, all the details with the time constraints, but that's one topic that we talked about. And as many of you are aware, many discussions going on now with a potential merger between Avista and Hydro One out of Canada. My understanding is that's on hold at the moment, but certainly for energy purposes and energy availability, that's a big issue for everybody. Another one that came in and relating to energy would be Brian Ogle, who's not on the commission but is a regular participant and shows up in many of the meetings. And he was just showing us some of the ideas that solar could have, what could play, on residential homes as well as ranches and things like that throughout Latah County. These are, I will admit, photos I stole off of the internet, not from Brian, but the idea that solar does have a place and can have a place certainly in Latah County in both residential as well as in ranch. And then something I always like is thinking outside the box. And Brian brought this up. What about using solar on some of these paths we have around here? We are blessed to have some of these wonderful bike paths here, and he brought up the point that you can place solar in many of these things for lighting without digging trenches and running lines and all that. A great idea. Bus stops, of course. We have construction and new bus stops going in. It's a great place for solar. And then one more thing, we have some potential city construction going on, but perhaps a police station at some point, and the idea that solar may play a place in there for part of the energy budget, I think is a great idea. And in fact, the SEC wrote a recommendation to council that you all received, I'm sure, to consider that as construction proceeds. Moving on, P&Z. We were asked by the P&Z to provide a small section in the upgraded or revised comp plan looking at local response to changing climate conditions. Now, I could spend about an hour on this. I won't, but I do want to, if I was wearing a hat, take it off to Miss Seaver over here. She is also on planning and zoning and played a huge role in this, and I know you all have seen it and we'll probably see more of this coming up. But obviously, climate change is in the news. How the city, the county, and our country is going to respond to that and be prepared for it is huge. And so having any language and recognition of that in the comp plan is key. And so I do thank not only Victoria, but the P&Z for at least recognizing the importance of including this in the comp plan revision. City staff, this isn't something that we were doing, but I never get tired of talking about this. Fuel conservation, and Tyler mentioned the environmental services. This is huge. Some of the changes that have taken place over the last 6 or 7 years in city fleet, small changes, driving habits, using electric vehicles, idling, how you manage your driving. We've decreased by 12,600 gallons the amount of fuel used in the city vehicles. I think that's about 65,000 pounds of carbon emission that have been decreased by just simple things like this. So again, it's not an SEC thing other than we get the report and say, yeah, keep doing it. Likewise, water conservation. You've heard about the toilet rebate program, and Kelly says requests are pouring in. Yeah. And they are. 2 million gallons have been saved annually, and likewise, the Yscape program and the rebate program for yards being converted over to Yscape, and of course, right out in front of this building, City Hall, with Yscape going on. Little things like this, they look like no-brainers, but it took someone with the idea and the implementation and then the support of the council to make it happen. And I applaud this, as does the rest of the SEC. Some other recent activities, the Mayor's Earth Day Award. This has been a long-standing tradition. I won't go through all of them, but I do thank Mayor Lambert for continuing this program and recognizing these individuals, the teachers that make things happen in the city of Moscow. It's wonderful. The role of the SEC in this, we nominate, we organize the nominations from outside the commission, give them to the mayor, and then he makes the awards and then does the recognition right here in this very chamber. So thank you very much for continuing to recognize these people. Very, very important. Several members of the SEC are on the Sanitation Master Plan Advisory Group. This is an extremely important part of solid waste, recycling, and everything else. Is something that people need to know more about. And Gary, I know you were at the initial meeting and you hit it right. People are passionate about solid waste and recycling, as we are learning and as you all will learn as we move forward. Some of the things we were talking about, there's a survey that the commission members as well as the rest of the advisory group are discussing. capital improvements, possible relocation of the recycling center, and then the feasibility of a MRF, materials recovery facility. Extremely important, but under the radar for a lot of people until a change happens, and then people are, I won't say come unglued, but again, they're passionate about it. So it's really important to get this right and spend a lot of time getting feedback from the public with surveys and things like that, and then working with a very capable advisory group or consulting group. Climate change, again, very, very important, and we were contacted by the local chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby, Mary Dupree and Matt Cantrell, many of you know. And again, I can't spend a lot of time talking about this, but one of the CCL's objectives is to have cities like Moscow join other Idaho cities in encouraging effective legislation related to climate and energy change. Extremely important. And then secondly, they presented information on a novel idea for emission control, if you will, or regulation, with this carbon fee and dividend policy. And again, I can't say I completely understand all this, but the idea is to put a fee on carbon emissions and then provide that dividend back to the citizens, similar to what Alaska does with the oil revenues. That's kind of in a nutshell what I understand about it. Again, you'll hear more and more about this, I'm sure. Last thing I want to discuss is a response we received from a citizen concern, and this is the use of pesticides and herbicides in city parks and playfields. The SEC has always been a part of reviewing the city streets and city parks use of pesticides. We get the list every year. It's very an important part of us to review it, and if we have any comments, the city Parks and Rec, as well as city streets, is very receptive to any concerns we have. This is a little bit different, and the concern here was that's fine for controlling weeds, but what happens when it's on playgrounds? What happens when it's in the dog park? What happens when it's on a soccer field? And so looking at more of a health concern approach, which is something we really hadn't done. So where we are on this right now is we're collaborating. And this is such an important aspect, I think, of this potential thing, is an integrated approach to picking apart the problem and how we're going to go forward. And so we've had presentations now by the SEC subcommittee and the concerned citizen, and then Dwight Curtis, who's the director of Parks and Rec. We've identified Otness Park as a demonstration site in order to try organic land management, reduced or no pesticide use, and formed yet another subcommittee to do some research on this and involve many, many different players, not just one side or one faction, but to get people that actually work in the field on the parks, people that are responsible like Dwight to understand how the public accepts weeds and use of pesticides. He has to answer to everybody just as the council does. And then also people from the SEC. So you'll be certainly hearing more about this. This is just getting rolling, and next year will be I think the opportunity to see what can happen in Otness Park with respect to weed management. The last thing I want to say is we are very proud of our farmers market, and we use the farmers market as a great outreach opportunity. The SEC tables twice a year at the farmers market, puts out these ideas that we have, things that we're working on, and then gets input, questions and answers, suggestions from the various people that are at the market on that particular Saturday. With that, I'll wrap things up and ask if you all have any questions.
Steve, I have a couple of comments for you.
Sure.
One of the things is we talk about fuel savings, and I did this through our budget workshop and talked about it, and some of those things that we've been able to save. And it's like anything else, you have to keep chipping away, because it's the small things that can turn into big things over years and years and years. And that's a savings of two different things, not only the carbon emissions that we decrease here in the city of Moscow, but also the savings to our citizens who would pay for this through their taxes and other things and other fees, so on and so forth. And that will continue. This city has done a marvelous job of that, and it will continue. We've got Les and Tyler and their departments through the fleets, electric fleets, as well as less electric cars, different things that we can utilize and use from the standard trucks that we used to use before. We are able to save a lot of that, and that's going to continue. Mm-hmm. And also I wanted to make a mention on the climate control, we are in the process, the city of Moscow, writing a letter on it and our point of view, and our point of view is going to have those very things about the carbon emissions that we have worked on so diligently over the last 6 or 7 years, and that's going to continue, and it gives us an opportunity to take the leadership role in the state of Idaho to put heat, for a lack of a better word, on our fellow cities throughout this state. But it'll be kind of a fun thing to do because I think that's a leadership role that we can continue to have and strive for. So we're working on that. Catherine?
Yeah, I just want to say I went to the last CCL meeting, and if you want information about the carbon pricing, there was a World Bank presentation done on the about 50 countries that have since 1990 been doing the carbon fee. So if anybody's interested, if you just type in the carbon fee in the World Bank, you'll pull up, it's a May 22nd, 2018 report, and it has, it's a PowerPoint too that has slides that show you which countries are doing it. And then tomorrow night, the Pullman City Council is doing their resolution, so I was going to go over to their council meeting and see how that went with us, because we've been talking about it here, and so definitely it's something that's we're aware of and interested in. And I would also, I've been bringing up some points with our council about fracking and some of the things there and what's been happening down in the southern part of the state. And so if you are interested, I would love to talk to the SEC about those things.
I would love to. That's another, certainly we haven't, there's too many things to talk about, of course, but that fracking is a big one, and I know there are potential fracking sites in the state of Idaho, and so certainly that would be something we'd love to hear more about.
Other questions for Steve or comments?
I would
Randy?
just say I've really enjoyed being the liaison, and I've learned so much, and I know the issues are big and complicated and not easy to solve, and I'm impressed with how committed everyone is to listening to each other, working through it, working with the other commissions and city staff to try to solve these really big problems.
Thank you, Brandy. And thank you, council members and Mayor Lambert. It really is to have the support not only for the SEC, but the environmental services and just the rest of Moscow. It makes it a great place to live, and it's because of you.
Okay, now,
So,
before you run off, Steve, I mean, you're the chair of that commission. I appreciate all the work that all the commissions do, but especially appreciate what you do with that. But you also are our URA chair here as well in Moscow. And this guy devotes a lot of time for these various meetings and things. So thank you very much for your efforts and the work you do, Steve.
It's a privilege.
Muchly
Thank you.
appreciated. You bet. Okay, we will move on to item number 6, which is our public hearing for the City of Moscow's 2019 annual budget. And Gary will be doing a presentation on that.
Your Honor, if I may start this out by saying that during my day job, I'm actually the executive director of the Partnership for Economic Prosperity, and as such, I will recuse myself from that part of the budget in which we discuss our contribution for that organization. I will be voting on the rest of it. but
Okay,
not
so
that one.
you will be recusing yourself as far as the PEP part of the budget is concerned, but we'll be voting for other things.
Yes, sir.
Lori, you got that? Thank you. Gary, podium's yours, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm happy to, I have some allergies, so if I sound like I'm talking from the bottom of a well, you'll understand. Happy to present the proposed budget for fiscal 2019. We previously had a council workshop on July 9th, and council was there, asked a bunch of questions, gave a very extensive presentation. Obviously, it took 6 hours to do that. We don't intend on doing that tonight. Refined a bunch. I have a lot of data that we will go through. I will not read the slides to you as you've seen them before, but I will paraphrase those, which I think will help the public to understand the process. So first of all, talking about community partnerships, these are just a listing of some of the things that the council and the city participate in. Events, as you can see listed out, National Night Out, I believe is tomorrow night, if I'm correct, in downtown Moscow. Certainly all the public is invited to go out to that. But those are just some of the events that the city participates in. We also have supported at different times Sojourners Alliance, the Palouse Ice Rink in the amount of $1 million if they can meet the requirements of the proposal. I believe they have till June of 2019 to complete their conditions in order to collect on that $1 million of Hamilton funds. Family Promise of the Palouse was the recipient of the proceeds of the Mayor's Golf Tournament, which, to put in a shameless plug for that, it takes place this Friday, 8 o'clock at the University of Idaho Golf Course. You may contact the city and they will get you set up for that. But the proceeds of that charitable event go to the Family Promise of the Palouse. And then Poverty on the Palouse has been a big process that we've been going through. The mayor's been liaisoning with different folks for Poverty on the Palouse. It was the subject of our quarterly regional breakfast meeting had in July. A lot of good information was exchanged at that time. I have no idea what I just did. There we go. Okay. Talking about funding efficiencies, we talked about the Eco Driver program, and as you can see, it is a lot of stuff that is going on. If you look, I typically go to the graphs, and if you look at the graphs from the historical trend line to what actually is happening, that is a lot of fuel saved and a lot of pollutants that aren't introduced into the atmosphere. Some of the other things that have been done, the sewer bond refinancing, you'll recall we did that last December, which will save on our 2017 bonds, 2007 bonds, will save about $360,000 over the next 10 years. Don't worry, I'll get through this. Okay, last park equipment installation. Dwight's crew has, he's provided them the resources to get trained to install playground equipment, which has saved us $14,000 alone on the Indian Hills Park installation. So that's a huge issue for us. But it's a way for us to stretch the public's dollar. We're driven in the budget process by the strategic plan, and these are the major challenge areas for that strategic plan. You've seen them many, many times, and we'll refer to those throughout the process tonight. Those major challenge areas in the strategic plan drive our budget process. In the old days, we had council goals that were annual goals. Since then, we've taken to look at long term, so it allows us to really address some of these problems that continue to arise, such as deteriorating pavement conditions, and we have some pretty interesting slides later on that will talk about that. But as you see, they're fairly comprehensive things, and we try to address those as best we can throughout the budget. Then we have internal major challenge areas. One of the things that we're looking at right now is we talked about a bond going forward to fund a replacement police station. We'll talk a little bit today about law enforcement staffing that we've addressed, high cost of aging equipment, so on and so forth. So all of these have been addressed at least peripherally within the budget. These are our most obvious successes. We'll talk a little bit in a while about the deteriorating pavement conditions and the fact that we've gone from an average of about $260 to $290 per year in funding in years past. We are now over $800,000 per year. Public Works has indicated that we need about $1.4 million. We're not there yet, but we will continue to drive toward that. That is for our pavement management plan. We also have street construction in conjunction with our utilities, so on and so forth, that are going. One of those is happening up on 3rd Street above the raised crosswalk project. Insufficient public information, community engagement. You've seen our new website, which is much more intuitive than the old one. That's been a plus. Farmers Market, currently unsustainable. They now have a strategic plan. They have their own commission. They are part of our community events division. So they are doing very well, thank you. They did a rapid market assessment here 2 weeks ago, and preliminary numbers were well in excess of the 5,000 people that we thought were visiting every week, closer to 10,000. We're verifying the methodology for getting that assessment, but obviously it's a really big deal every weekend. Aging, deteriorating emergency fire apparatus. Those of you who are able to attend the farmers market on Saturday also saw the christening, if you will, or the activation of our new fire truck and the retirement of the old fire truck. So That fire truck, which was purchased within the budget year, was ordered in 2017, delivered in May of 2018, and it is now part of the city fleet. That was all done through strategic planning and our budgeting process, and with the council's direction that that's what you wanted to have done. We've also, this year, as you know, in the budget, we were able to work with the Idaho Attorney General's office, which has wanted our current cyber detective, Eric Jernus, to they will reimburse us for Eric's expenses. He will assist the state with their Child Abuse Task Force. ICAC is the acronym. Idaho Internet Crimes Against Children. There, I got it. So they will be reimbursing us for those expenses. It allows us to free up those funds to get another cyber detective trained up behind Eric. Eric will retire someday, we presume. And one of our challenges in the police department is when you put that much training into one person, they take a position somewhere else, you have to virtually start over again. So we're trying to get ahead of the curve on this one. Also, we have negotiated with the Moscow School District. They would like another school resource officer position. We found a way for them to phase into that, so that will allow us the ability to hire another school resource officer. Again, addressing our strategic planning initiatives. Budget process overview, I've told you a lot on how we do this. It's about a 4-month preparation process. The purpose is it's a fiscal policy manual, it's an operational guide and a financial plan, and all of these other things. It is not an accounting document. It is, the council looks at the projects, looks at the programs, and then determines what they wish to fund, and they appropriate funds in order for us to do that. So it is not an accounting device. We have a CAFR or an audit that does that. So this is what I always called it, the largest policy statement the council makes every year. When you authorize us to move forward and you sign off on the budget, you're saying, staff, spend your time doing this. And that's what we try to do. So that's the basics of the budget process. As we talked about on the 9th, and as you all know from our orientation sessions, we are a fund accounting system. We have the general fund, which is our largest fund, and all of these things fall under the general fund. It's our catch-all fund. That's where our property taxes are receipted. If it comes into the general fund, if it isn't specifically earmarked for something, the council can choose to spend it on whatever they want, and they do. A lot of general fund monies are used to support typically the special revenue funds, street and 1912 Center, Transit Center, and then the Culture and Recreation Fund, which is fairly new. It's this, I believe we're in our 2nd year of that. Culture and Recreation combines the revenues of the arts and culture funds, or culture and recreation funds, which would be Parks and Rec, community events, and farmers market into one revenue. And then we split out the expenses for each of those operations. Then you have your construction funds, debt service funds. Enterprise funds are those things that we run like a business. Water, sewer, and sanitation are 3 enterprise funds. And then we have 2 internal service funds that are fleet management and information systems. These are departments that provide services almost exclusively to the city's operation. So the customers are the city departments. So these are all the different types of funds that the city uses every year in its budget process. In looking at property tax adjustments, that's something that folks want to talk about. We are allowed 3% property tax increase under Idaho law of the previous year's budget. If we don't take the full 3%, it's put in what's called a foregone amount that we've talked about, taxes authorized but not taken. They're kind of put in a savings account, which is, and that doesn't mean people are paying taxes on it, it's taxes authorized but not levied. So they just keep a running count in Boise as to how much of that capacity we still have. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a few moments. Currently, the general fund, the taxes that will be levied this year are $5,666,359. Now, you'll notice if you look at the L2 in your packet, the number that you see written down in the L2 is about $90,151 higher. 41? $90,141. That is funds that the state gave us for replacement of personal property taxes about 10 years ago, and those funds are paid to the county, who allocates those out according to the formula. And so if you add that to that number, you will come up with the number you see on your L2. But those property tax replacement funds are not taxes that are paid by City of Idaho residents. Okay, the levy rate is $4.94 per thousand, and we'll talk about that in a few moments again. We're also able to exceed the 3% maximum amount by new construction values. Those are things that are built and then come on the tax rolls, and when they do, the current levy is applied to those as well. We also take into account annexations, so our annexation valuation for last year was not huge, $41, but you get the 3% maximum, annexations, and new construction values. That determines your property taxes. Now, if you look at this, this is a dollar, 100% of a dollar generated by a City of Moscow taxpayers. You can see the City of Moscow's piece of that is 26.5. Our city bond, which is the Hamilton Low Aquatic Center, was paid off, so this will no longer be there. So the City of Moscow will be at 26.5%. Moscow School District at 35%. They have a bond of 2.7. Latah County at 23.5. Highway District, Library, and Cemetery District as well. So if the council raises taxes by 2%, it is 2% of 26.5% of a dollar. So it is not 2% on that dollar. So we like to explain that because when people pay taxes in Moscow, they aren't only paying taxes to the City of Moscow. Some of it goes to the county, some of it goes to the Highway District, and certainly some of it goes to the Moscow School District. One thing we always like to look at is what is our levy rate from the city standpoint. Our city levy rate is $4.92 in fiscal year 2017. The average levy rate for cities across the state was $7.48, up to a high of the city of Wallace, which is shy of $12. And down here you got City of Paris, which is about $2. So we compare very favorably on the city's levy. This is the cities, this is a comparison of Coeur d'Alene, Moscow, and Lewiston as far as the percentage of dollars that are taken in those cities, how much of it goes to the city. As you can see, highest up here is Lewiston, Coeur d'Alene is here, and the City of Moscow is down here. So a much lower percentage of a city tax dollar, a city resident's tax dollar comes back to the City of Moscow. These are the largest taxing entities in Latah County. We have the city, the county, and the school district. As you can see, since 2007, we've had some things going on, but fluctuation. This is the Great Recession years here. We're starting to come back a little bit, so that is good news. Okay, one of the things that makes Moscow unique is we have a lot of tax-exempt property. And we just updated this today. We're still waiting for Moscow School District's numbers. These numbers here represent replacement value, if you will, or insurable value of improvements that these nonprofit entities have on the land that they own. So this number here does not even count the land upon which these improvements sit. And we're at $1.4 billion. So that is tax-exempt property. If you look over here on the taxable value property, what exactly generates the taxes that all of our real property tax entities rely upon, it is $1,076,188,100. So as you can see, over half of the value in Moscow is non-taxable, which currently explains some of the situations our school district, our city, and our county are in as far as taxes are concerned. One of the things we look at, we spend, like any service-based organization, we have employees that look forward to their paychecks and being adjusted and remaining current with their market. In this budget, it is proposed a 2.1% cost of living adjustment. We do that looking from March to March, and it came up this year. That is the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it is 2.1%. and that's how we've calculated the COLA for many years. Salary adjustments remain the same as last year. We have a step and grade system for our police department, 7-step system. There is 3.5% between each step, and I believe 3.5% between grades. So every year, if a police officer gets a satisfactory evaluation, they can expect a 3.5% increase up to 7 times. In our AMP system, our actively managed performance system that everybody else in the city is under, you can get a maximum of 4%. An average of 4% is what we budget for if you are under market. In other words, you haven't got to the market where our salary survey would say you should be. So we just completed a salary survey. We're still looking at that and getting it ready to go. But that is what we're proposing for those under 100%. Since it is a system that is based on performance, there is a 1% average available to those employees who are making more than 100% if they have excellent reviews that warrant it. We also have a wellness program. Our health plan this year we've been very excited about. As the council knows, we are looking at some self-funding options, but our current health plan through Regents Blue Shield has only a 2% increase in premium, which is great, meaning that our employees are pretty healthy, they take care of themselves, and our experience is low. VIBA program, Voluntary Employee Benefit Account, is proposed at $350 per employee, the same as it's been the last 2 years. And then we have these different employee recognitions as well. Personnel changes, as I said, space-based organization, we've been trying some new and different things. As you know, our previous Human Resources Director, Mark Brigham, left us, and Jen Piffner, the Assistant Finance Director, is acting Human Resources Director. You'll see her funding coming 60% from administration, 40% of HR. Part of that reorganization is our half-time administrative assistant HR specialist will now be a full-time HR specialist. So we're trying some different things up there as well. We've also added a half-time department specialist to provide support for the grants program. In finance, this next year, we hope that the finance director will be appointed and the acting finance director, who's in way over his head, can step back down. But we hope to have that transition complete. We are currently advertising for an assistant finance director. Interviews for that position will be held on the 16th of this month, and we hope to identify a successor there. And the position of special assistant to the acting finance director has been eliminated with the retirement of Sue Nelson. Legal department, we've added a 1 half-time department specialist because of the huge amount of public records requests we're getting, resulting in increased workloads, and electronic filing, which is something that all of the lawyers in the state love, but it's taking a long time to transition into that. We talked a little bit about the police already. I've already talked about the cyber detective position and the SRO position. General fund buildings and grounds, we have funded a facilities maintenance worker to assist with the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning for our facilities. In the meantime, a lot of the facilities time, the two employees at this time employed in facilities have been spending about mid 30%, 35-36% of their time at the Hamilton Low Aquatic Center. So in the interest of accounting for where expenses are being incurred, 60% of this facilities worker, one of the facilities workers, obviously not the HVAC person, will be assigned to the Hamilton Low Aquatic Center, and 60% to the general fund and 40% to Parks and Rec Aquatic Center. And a 5-month seasonal maintenance has also been transferred to Parks and Recreation, which currently was done in facilities. Parks maintenance worker has been proposed to replace a 9-month part-time mowing lead. Makes more sense. We are paying Percy and extended benefits for a 9-month position, when an 8-month position you don't have to pay Percy. It's a part-time position, so we've reformatted that, so we will be adding a recreation person, or excuse me, a parks maintenance person there. In the pool, 4-month part-time aquatic specialist assists with the maintenance of the pool along with the support from facilities. We're also doing some restructure, and I forgot to mention that we're also adding didn't make it on the list, we're adding a street maintenance worker as well, that we talked about, some of the 3rd Street bicycle lane improvements and some of those things with the difficulty in maintaining those programs. So one of those has been proposed in the street department as well. Restructuring and reclassification will happen in these different places. I won't hit every one, except that arts and community events, because it is a new division, we'll be seeing some changes there. Our longtime arts director, Kathleen Burns, will be leaving us in October. So we have some different ideas about restructuring that administration as well. And information system and streets, what we like to do is provide opportunities for promotion in appropriate circumstances and for folks to be able to move up, transition plans. If someone moves on, what is the next step? Are we able to reach down into our employee pool and pull somebody up for management positions? This is a great diagram, kind of shows where the money comes in by revenue source. So you've got services that you charge for. Property taxes amount to only 6.71% of the city's budget. And intergovernmental revenues coming from the state. We've got fund balance. Fund balance is a huge number. It's money that's maintained for operations and for accumulations. Capital transfers, operating transfers, so on and so forth. So that's where the money comes from. Where does the money go? So if we look at this slide, you'll see general government is less than 10% of the overall funding. And then you've got enterprise funds, capital outlay. We've got well number 10, the booster stations, sewer projects, you name it, street projects. Or excuse me, streets are somewhere else. But enterprise funds, that's a huge amount for capital outlay. And that's because, as we saw with the 3rd Street Bridge bids, the cost of maintenance, the cost of replacement, the cost of construction is going up. So that's generally where the money goes. Oh, also of note is public safety. Public safety is police, fire, and engineering. So all of those are funded out of the general fund. So to get general government and public safety, you kind of need to add these two together. General fund revenues will hit very quickly. Again, total budget is $15,957,040. Property tax we just talked about. That's that number, which is the taxes. And then this is the personal property tax repeal participation from the state. State revenues about $2.2 million, and those are described down there. Franchise fees of $1.2 million. We'll talk about those in a few minutes as well. Building permit and plan revenue. These are some of those permits in different departments, different activities that are permitted through community development. Transfers in from these different departments. As you know, the city administration, legal department, HR department, finance department, engineering, community development, all provide services to the enterprise funds and the special revenue funds. So those that are able of special revenue funds to reimburse the city at least partially for those services because they're being funded out of the general fund, we do. You'll notice Parks and Rec and community events is not under here, and it's because we'll get in a few moments, we'll see what the subsidy from the general fund is already for those divisions, and transferring money back would not make a lot of sense. But water, sewer, and sanitation and streets all participate in that. We do that by means of an allocation model, looking at the work that's been done the previous year and determine how that number is arrived at. Then we have our fund balance, and moving on to the foregone amount. Foregone amount, as we talked about, are those taxes authorized but not taken? Council would have to invoke a different process in order to take any of the foregone amount, which means we would have a separate public hearing, a separate public notice, and if the council wanted to take that. That's a new law that came into effect 2 years ago. Nothing this year is anticipated to be taken, was not proposed. So this is something that was done in 2017. There were replacement investment revenues in the Hamilton Fund, you'll recall. Permanent funding for 2 police officer positions that had previously come to us through a grant, and participation in the runway realignment project for the Pullman-Moscow Regional Airport. In FY18, there was no foregone amount taken. The balance at that time was $268,000 that could have been taken had the council chosen to. And now in fiscal 19, as no foregone amount is anticipated, and there is 1% added to that amount should be $324,295 that the council could choose to take in subsequent years if they wanted to. But you need to take it in the budget process. You can't decide in December you want to take it and then levy the taxes. It can only be done in the same process we're following tonight.
Quick question.
Yes.
If you can go back to that
You
previous
bet.
slide. Just as a reminder, those 3 bullets under FY 2017, those were not taken out in that year, correct? That was just previous years leading up to?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. Okay, this is a graphical of the state sales, liquor tax, and revenue sharing. As you can see, again, during the Great Recession, everything seemed to go down except for state liquor, which continued to rise. But we've seen some big increases after that in sales tax and revenue sharing, which has served to bring more of that state money back to the city and local. Franchise fees, as you can also see, we had some fairly precipitous increases and decreases in 2006. That is because that year there was an initiative that the city of Moscow voters voted on. We had, I believe it was an 8% gas tax, not fuel tax, but natural gas franchise fee that was paid via Vista, but we had no franchise fee on electricity. So due to a change in state law, you could take up to a 3% franchise fee of electricity. Yes, electricity. So the voters, we put it out to the voters voted for it, and as part of that, the council said, if you will vote for this, we will bring both of these to 3%. So the gas franchise and electric franchise are at 3%. So we also have a franchise fee on sanitation, so that's the thing you see down here. Building permit revenue, again, really good, and then dropped down during the Great Recession. Now we're seeing it slowly climb back up. Moscow's never experienced the meteoric growth rates that some of our neighbors have, specifically Coeur d'Alene and the Treasure Valley, but we tend to move along. We don't have the real highs, but then again, we don't have the real lows either. General fund departments, we talked about most of these already. We did have, again, the Human Resources Director situation. Finance, we've already talked about. There are a couple things, utility billing. We outsourced that last year. We now have different bills. They come in envelopes. We're able to put a newsletter in there. People are able to track their usage. So they've been pleased about that, but that was done last year. And so that's why that number is increased if you look at your 3-year average. Miscellaneous services as well. Bank service fees keep going up, and it's because people are using the system more. So that continues to go up as well. In legal, we talked about the part-time assistant, and we talked about the human resources. Police services, we've already talked about most of this. There is an overtime increase because there is, we were not paying overtime. We're flexing schedules for non-sworn personnel to assist in special events such as National Night Out. So the chief has asked, because that flex time was taking a toll on the operations of the department, would we be able to increase some overtime for that, and we've done that. Whitcomb contract increases by 3% per the contract. General buildings and grounds we've already talked about. There are some things of note. One is third-party inspections and testing of fire alarm systems. That made a lot of sense. If you're having your own stuff tested, having your own people test it for certification purposes probably isn't the right thing to do, so we decided to reach out with that. The library tree and lawn concrete project. We've also got replacement of 9 street benches along Main Street. Some of those benches have been in pretty bad shape, so we're trying to assist in beautifying the downtown. And then access systems for fire stations. So what we're trying to do is to have a key fob system that will allow the volunteers and staff to enter into the fire stations without the necessity of a big key ring. Non-departmental is a special section of the general fund. It's where transfers happen. A lot of things happen out of non-departmental. So you've got support for the Southeast Moscow Industrial Park project and an affordable housing assessment project that was proposed that we're considering. That is something that is still in the works. It's $10,000 of that fund is in there for that. Public transportation supports smart transit. Historic Preservation Commission, the City Historian Program, I believe this year is being funded at $3,000. It has been $2,500 in the past. Then, of course, you've got your catch-all for economic development. Gina indicated she is abstaining from voting on this portion of the budget because she's the executive director of PEP. But there are also these other economic development organizations that the city also supports. Airport development, this is that $2.5 million commitment. In FY19, we will make the final payment, $515,750, for that airport participation. At that point, we will begin, that funding came from some borrowing of the enterprise funds, and they will be taken back and paid back with an interest rate as we reported to council when we first started the project. There's also a transfer to the general fund, or to the street fund from the general fund in the amount of $120,000, and that's really how the general fund supports these special revenue funds. So all of these transfers are for the different things the council supports. The biggest one, of course, is, as I indicated before, recreation and culture. They do charge some fees, but they aren't nearly enough to we don't charge people for use of the parks. We don't charge people the actual cost of the using the Hamilton Low Aquatic Center. We are hard pressed to even offset the bulk of the services or the human resource that is spent to run these operations. And that doesn't even count what you have to spend on maintenance and what you need to spend if you want to replace it. So it's supported by the general fund. Then you've got the Moscow School District Community Playfields, 1912. Arts Fund is gone, as I indicated. It's now up in Recreation and Culture. Capital Projects is how we take general fund monies and put it into general fund capital, so about $101,000 there. Fleet Services is how we pay for fire engines, so on and so forth. Street also is supported heavily with the general fund as far as their vehicles. Streets does a great job. They put as much money as they can in the surface of the streets. General fund has helped out with helping them meet their needs for equipment. And then information systems. So swinging into the special revenue funds, they're listed there. So look at your street fund, road and bridge tax, and highway users revenue. Of course, highway users is another euphemism for the gas tax. So as you can see, we've seen some pretty good increases the last couple of years with the changes that the legislature made. They could make more if they wanted to. They were moderate changes, but as you can see, they were a huge amount to proportionally to the funding we were getting. Okay, highlights in the street fund. Street superintendent will become streets manager. So what we're trying to do is, again, get that plan so that we have the highest level of management in these departments so that they can cross-train and take care of things if someone were to move on, or having someone on the ground when the manager isn't available. So these are just generally some of the things that are going on. Transfer to the general fund, transfer to capital projects. One of the ways that capital projects funding is accumulated in the street capital for projects, we also transfer general fund capital into street projects as we do for parks and rec projects, so on and so forth. We'll talk about that a little more in a few moments. Transfer to fleet is interesting. Street fund is paying $122,000 of the purchase of a Vector truck. and the rest of that is being funded with participation from the general fund. Again, if we paid for the entire Vector truck out of the street fund, they would not be able to do as much road reconstruction as they do in maintenance, so we try to divvy that out a little bit, if you will. These are miscellaneous special revenue funds. Moscow School District community playfields are both the city and school district pay in 50% of the maintenance costs, but they are maintained by the city through city forces. We also try to improve it. There's 4 benches that are being installed in the offloading area, hopefully making it more convenient for users. 1912 Center, the 1912 Center, that is where the general fund makes a transfer to the 1912 Center Fund for the contract with Heart of the Arts. We did fund that this year, both with current revenues, and there was an accumulated fund balance that really wasn't necessary for a special revenue fund, so that also helped us meet those revenue needs. Intermodal Transit Center is funded by facility user fees. One thing, if you look there, facility user fees are paid by Smart Transit, Partnership for Economic Prosperity, and then the University of Idaho Transportation and Parking Services pays for 55.74% of the operating expenses of that facility. We are replacing the sidewalk around the ITC. If you see it today, there are guys out there with jackhammers. They're tearing it up, and we're replacing that sidewalk. Again, the University of Idaho is participating 55.74% of that project. Culture and Recreation, talk a little bit about that. The one thing you'll see in a federal grant for the Farmers Market Promotion Planning Grant, kind of a big grant. It's one of those things that we think we have a shot at it, a good shot, so we put it in the budget. If it is not received, the funds will not be spent. Okay? You got recreation programs are being increased 5% to help offset the increased cost of personnel. One thing you'll see throughout this is, and through the budget detail, that we are increasing our part-time summer help, seasonal help, $1 an hour because the state of Washington continues to hike their minimum wage, which makes it tougher for us to hire people. So we've got to keep pace. So we're trying to approach that systematically, and one of the ways is to increase cost of the recreation programs. Swimming pool fees, because it is so personnel driven, we have a lot of lifeguards, a lot of concessionaires out there, concessions workers, so they're being proposed to increase by 7%, and youth fees along with the recreation programs. Of course, the big funding is the support through the general fund. And we also have transferred in from capital projects $52,000 to replace or repair the Herc siding and for repainting of it. Some of the siding is in need of some repairs, so we're trying to take care of that as well. There is a transfer in from the Hamilton Fund. That is something that the council directed based on the amount of the remaining balance of the Hamilton Fund goes to help offset the costs of the Hamilton Indoor Recreation Center. Parks, there's an addition of a parks maintenance worker. We talked a little bit about taking the 9 months seasonal to an 8 months, so that's been done. We also have one of the things that has Dwight's people have done very nicely downtown is the Holiday Lights program, which they're now year-round, and they're consistently replacing and repairing those LED lights, which used to be put up only in the fall, determine which were worked, and it was kind of a real burden on the workers because they'd have to pull off every other project. Now they can work it in their routine maintenance. There are also some drinking fountains, bottle fillers along Berman's Creekside Park and Friendship Square, which will be a welcome addition. In pool, we've talked about the facilities maintenance worker, siding repair and painting of the Hamilton Indoor Rec Center, also installation of new water fountain and bottle filler for the users, and refinishing of the gym floor, which they do every year. They keep that in very nice shape, and Jay Lewis and the facilities guys go out and refinish that. It takes them about 2 weeks, I believe, to get that done, but it looks like new every time they do it. This one's a little hard to read. Arts, we talked about that. Arts Director Manager, as I said, we're also looking at any reconfiguration or restructuring of that department's administration, so we'll be bringing that back. So you can see some of the things that are going on. There is the 1% for public, or 1% for arts capital projects is also included in there, and I think Kathleen's going to talk a little bit about that later tonight. This, of course, is for next year. And repair and maintenance reflects the cost of maintaining the public art inventory, which is something Kathleen's been advocating for some years, so we're starting to get a handle on that. Community events, we have a community event coordinator and various percentages of other time to assist with that. We've got an AmeriCorps who also helps. We got the USD Farmers Market grant that we are proposing. And then this is what the community events programs do at this time. There's a lot more stuff day to day, and also the farmers market is in there as well. So as you can see, there is a lot of stuff going on there. We think we'll be able to manage it a lot better under common administration. Going to the enterprise funds, this is water, sewer, and sanitation. These are a comparison of rates. Solid waste is yellow. As you can see throughout Latah County, it's about the same because essentially the city of Moscow runs the ultimate disposal and hauling program and operates the transfer station through Latah Sanitation. So you see there are a lot of similarities there. Sewer is a little bit different. So you can see our sewer rate down here. There are a few that are higher. There are some that are lower, but some that are lower, it depends on what shape their sewer system is. Potlatch just lately, over the last 5 years, has had to get a grant to rebuild their entire sewer system. So their rates are right up there with the cities, higher than the city of Moscow. The city of Moscow, as you know, systematically in their budget has a capital program, so on and so forth, to keep us from falling into that trap of our system becoming deteriorating. And actually, it was one of the major challenge areas that we have in our strategic plan. And of course, the water system, as you can see, is all over the board as well. Water systems, drilling wells, new pipes, very expensive proposition. Well number 10, booster stations are all part of the water department. So, water fund revenue, and we'll talk about this a little more in the fee resolution, is proposed to increase 6.3% according to the 2013 rate study implemented by the City Council. So that will flow all the way through the water revenues. Expenses, we have an additional apprentice maintenance worker, which is proposed. That was also recognized in the rate study as well as the comprehensive facilities plan. These are some of the things that are done in professional services. A lot of stuff going on there, and it's a big part of the budget. Again, you can read it for yourselves. But it includes the basin adjudication, all of the analyses, the Y-scape services, all those things that the water department participates in. PBAC participation funds both membership and research. It's $40,000, $20,000 each, one for membership and participation, the other for continuing research. Department supplies, there's implementing a 5-year program to replace inefficient water meters with radio read meters at a cost of $100,000 per year. This is proposed to be the first year of that program in 2019. Good news is rental property is no longer funded. It is a big goose egg because we just completed the purchase of the Magyar building last week. So that is now a full-fledged city facility. And so stop by. I'm sure it's changed a lot in the last week. Okay, water fund. These are some of the expenses again. Developer participation, that's oversizing in some of the things that is determined to be beneficial. We can participate with developers to help offset those costs. And then transfer, this is again like the general fund non-departmental, this is where transfers go. We talked about the general fund allocation model, that's here. Transfer to the street fund for the cost of repairs, culture and recreation for grounds maintenance, water capital, that's the vehicle where current revenues or rates are sent to capital for accumulation for all of the projects that have been identified and approved. Same thing with the fleet fund. Sewer fund revenues, a little bit different. I think I misspoke. This should be an average of 4% less, if I'm correct, rather than 6.3, so I just transposed a number, sorry about that. That also is in accordance with the 2013 rate study. We'll talk about that a little more when we talk about the fee resolution. Professional services, again, these are a list of services that they do. Some of the ongoing programs that aren't talked about a lot are manhole grounding, I&I abatement, inflow and infiltration. So in a storm event, we don't want groundwater or surface water getting into our sanitary sewer. So the sewer department does lots of things to try and keep that from happening, so they have an ongoing maintenance program. Bond and bond interest, as you know, we refinanced both the 2001 bonds and the 2007 bonds at different times. As I indicated, when we refinanced the 2007 bonds, now they're Series 2017, which will save about $360,000 over the next 10 years in payments. Again, transfers out, same as for the water department, for the same things. The allocation model to the general fund first, and then streets, culture and recreation, and capital. I tried to stuff sanitation on one slide because I figured you'd be getting bored by now. This is riveting stuff from my perspective, so I hope it's as fun for you. Residential collection is a 3% increase. That's in accordance with the 2016 rate study. And then for bulky waste, tipping fees, that sort of thing, 4.4%. Again, that's all in conformance with the rate study. You'll see a 2.1% adjustment in the amount of funds that we pay Latos Sanitation for collection in the franchise. That is according to the franchise agreement. Relocation of the recycling center, professional services is also reflected there, and then transfer to the general fund, again pursuant to the allocation model, and then transfer to capital. Recycling center, compost, again 2.1% adjustments all the way down the line. Now, interestingly, the waste collection transport contract, the council approved, reviewed request for proposal. Currently, Findlay Butte's limited partnership, which is a subsidiary of Waste Connections, who provides those services to us now, has given us an offer, and we are currently negotiating that contract. But that should set us up for 17 years of regulated, sustainable rates for transport and disposal of solid waste. Internal service funds, won't spend a lot of time on these, but we did get a CDBG grant during fiscal year 18 to assist with the purchase of a fire engine that we ordered in 2018. It will come in May of 2019. All of these other things are transfers in for those vehicles that are assigned to those different general fund or enterprise fund departments. These are fuel expenses. Then you talk about purchase of these different sorts of things, and we've got a better slide right here that talks about just in this fiscal year what is being purchased for city use. So you've got pickups, you've got patrol vehicles, we've got 2 motorcycle leases for the police department. Throughout, if you look at parks, they've got some things that they need, equipment, fire truck or fire equipment as well. Of course, the pumper truck has been ordered already, so on and so forth. So a lot of acquisitions. These are accumulations. These are what's being purchased in this year. And again, that Vector truck alone is $300,000. The sewer department, I wanted to commend them as well. They had a 4-wheeler and a John Deere Gator out there. Again, through, I think, our fleet department sitting down with them, talking about what makes sense. They are now going to a side-by-side recreational type vehicle, utility vehicle, and they're getting rid of those 2. So they're getting 1 to replace 2, which is really a good deal. Information systems, again, internal service fund. You'll see throughout information systems that there are transfers from virtually every department, enterprise fund, special revenue funds, for the amount of technology that each of those departments uses. That offsets the cost of operating the information systems department, as well as transfers that will pay for equipment for those different departments as well. The only thing I wanted to point out here is the network administrator is being promoted to assistant director / network administrator. They're doing a lot of work out there. We have to implement some sort of on-call policy, so we're trying to get enough staff to be able to do that. There's been many times, I shouldn't say many times, but several times over the last year where on weekends we don't have an on-call policy. If there's a problem with our communications, a problem with our computers, we also have the fiber network that we manage, and we actually lease fiber out to customers. They have to run down Jesse or Tom or somebody else to help with that. So as we're providing those more services, they're very critical to the operation. We need to address that, so this is the first step in doing that. These are proposed capital projects in 2019. In the budget, it'll say 3rd Street multimodal bridge pursuant to council direction. We are focusing on a bicycle pedestrian bridge, a temporary bicycle and pedestrian bridge, so that has changed just a little bit. But these are different projects that will be pursued in FY 2019. So there's a lot of projects there. Again, I won't read them all off. Blackbird Station will be completed if the council approves this budget. So that should be a nice addition to the pass system. These are the accumulations. If you look at all these, a lot of different projects, and each of these has some amount of money associated with it that when sufficient monies or priorities are put out by the council, we will continue to accumulate and bring those projects forward for construction. So with that, 58
Questions
slides.
for Gary? You probably ought to take a drink of water, Gary, before anybody asks anything.
Thank you.
Covered a lot of information in a short period of time. Questions for Gary from council before we open up this public hearing? Okay, Gary, well, you will probably have some questions as we go along. Okay, at the moment, it is 8:15. I will open up the public hearing for the 2019 budget. Anybody who would like to come up and speak, we will give you 3 minutes. And tell us what is on your mind. Identify yourself. Name and address, please.
Victoria Seaver, 121 North Lily, Moscow. So with 6 minutes, I could talk about a lot more budget items, but in 3 minutes, here's where I'm going to go. So this is a good thing. This is just show and tell. This is a good thing in the new water bill because January's information sheet explains the timing and process for the budget and public comment tonight. The short version. Having attended the July 9th budget workshop and numerous council meetings, I'm seeing how the budget is spent and how it builds up to the FY19 proposed budget. I have no issues with tonight's budget and support it. That goes for the proposed fee resolution as well, and it certainly goes for the proposed public facilities bond. Incidentally, we'll have 2 new city buildings with the police station and the recycling center. This is a prime opportunity to walk the talk and seriously study solar panels and alternative energy usage. Moscow has been successful with conservation programs. Please shoot for solar in the preliminary design work and other energy savings design options. You got to take a look at it to see if it's feasible. The budget is a tool for planning, management, leveraging resources, adapting when circumstances change, and gaining ground on long-term goals. The city's done a good job of largely funding important projects without going out for an earlier bond and in competing for assistance grants, and it will continue to do that. Considering the breadth of a city budget, it's not surprising as some elements become controversial, like our airport was. We could ask Lewiston about the impact of an airport. Sometimes controversy propels us outside the box. An interesting thing happened on the way to a bridge. Regardless Regardless of which side of it you stand on, it generated nitty-gritty close collaboration between city and citizens that led to an impressive enhancements on the 3rd Street corridor. In today's escalated construction atmosphere, costs came in too high for the vehicular bridge now. It's the bridge that generated the corridor enhancements, and to complete those functions, it's the corridor that generated a go-ahead for a temporary pedestrian bike bridge. The budget has been and will be reworked to achieve these changes. I call that process synergy. I call it working with the situation you've got and stretching the dollar for quite a bit more. I call it a lesson in working through controversy instead of being paralyzed by it. I hope we're past the polarization stage and solidly into the stage of finding ways to mitigate problems and maximizing benefits. Of building more than a bridge structure, of bridging differences in other community areas and refining our Moscow vision as we go along, and to keep it inclusive and special. So let's pick up the budget, roll up our sleeves, and move forward in FY19.
Thank you, Victoria.
Joanne Manita, 203 South Howard, but don't try to drive there, it's impossible. I had just a couple of questions. In the capital fund, I saw $101,000, and then I saw a whole list of things that were going to be supported by that. Is there a match? And if not, where's more money coming from, or what are you going to drop out of the projects? That's one question. And it says that we're discussing a fee resolution. The only fee increase I caught, admittedly there were a lot of fine print, was 7% on the pool, and I always catch that because I go swimming every day. Are there other fee increases, and where is the fee resolution?
Well, Joanne, we're going to have a public hearing on the fee resolution when we're done with the budget. We'll be talking about
we didn't
fees
get
then.
to that yet.
Nope, we haven't got to that. That's coming up to follow.
That shows why I was paying attention and I didn't see it. Okay, just the capital projects question.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Brian Ogle. My address is 2200 Blaine Road. I'm here today to express support for this budget and also to add my support to the Sustainable Environment Commission's recommendation to explore solar. Victoria, and I didn't know that Steve was going to do anything about me either. By adding solar to the city's newest building, you're presented with some great opportunities. The first is that by producing electricity and sharing that power with Avista, you're going to be looking at lowering your power bill significantly. Solar systems come with a standard 25-year warranty, so you're looking at savings from now until the year 2044 at least. Most systems are going to last longer than that and continue to save you money. That's just the warranty period. Another opportunity that's presented is mentioned before by Steve, but it's to show leadership at a local, national, and even a global level. With the 2017 U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord, it's now the responsibility of states and local municipalities to lead the way on addressing global climate change. Renewable energy is one of those pieces that is going to move us towards that. And then the last one, which is idealistic, imaginative, and also exciting to me, is I see this as a potential first step towards adding resilience to the city during times of emergency. So with a centrally located police station, it can serve as an anchor in the future to a microgrid that can provide power to critical city circuits during an extended outage. There are examples of other cities that are working towards this or that have done this, like Sterling, Massachusetts, Hartford, Connecticut. It's a fun, exciting future idea. part of my personal commitment to environmental stewardship is I work at a local solar energy company. Steve mentioned that I've been attending sustainable environment meetings for the last year and a half. And just talking about different methods of solar integration, it's exciting to me. I'm happy to share education and answer questions. So if you ever have questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Would anybody else like to come up and talk on the budget? Okay, with that, I am going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and I'm going to ask Gary to respond to that 101,000 capital project. Gary, I didn't.
Thank you, Your Honor. Take me a few minutes to get, 3 seconds to get there.
Okay, we had lots of slides.
Yeah, it seems like I've got lots of slides. Okay, this is the transfer to capital projects I believe Joanne was talking about. This is a transfer of current revenues in FY 2019 that will join other revenues, other accumulations that are already in general fund capital. So for instance, last year I believe we had about $700,000, if my recollection is correct, in general fund capital accumulation. So this, and some of that was spent for several projects that the council approved. So this is a way to help replenish that so you can approve other projects and we can move forward. So it isn't going to equal all of the general fund capital projects. We will have to take from that accumulation as well. But what we try to do, if we can, is try and get as much transfer into capital as we can so we can put the projects the council wants to prioritize on the boards.
A good example of that, Gary, was when we did the downtown bathroom. That's where that money come from to finance that downtown bathroom that we put in last year, which was a terrific project that we'd been angst over
That's
for years.
precisely where it came from. You need to
Come on up, Joanne. We got to make you come up so everybody can see you and we can hear what you're saying.
So is whatever is left from the 580,000, maybe 300,000, is that, it's still in there then?
Yeah,
Yes, it is. You want to answer that, Gary?
Yes. She's referring specifically to the $580,000 that was budgeted for the Third Street Bridge. Out of those funds, about $100,000, I believe, has been spent in design and engineering, something like that. Council has also directed that a bicycle pedestrian bridge, temporary bridge, and all the accoutrements that will go along with that come out of that funding as well. So we anticipate probably somewhere, and I'm going out on a limb because I don't have any exact numbers, but I'm anticipating there may be around $400,000 that will remain in that accumulation. It's not going anywhere. It will stay there assigned to that project until council directs us otherwise.
One thing that I've always said, and this is my 5th year as being a mayor, is that because we have monies in there doesn't necessarily mean we spend everything on just whatever we want to. We're conservative about how we do it, and that gives us the availability of funds for other projects. And for example, our fire truck and things like this nature, we can come up with funds for things like that that was never in a budget ever before in this city. And it was something through the strategic planning process that we're able to do, and we can be frugal about it. No different than if you're at home and you get X amount of dollars each month and you put it in your checking account or your savings account, but you don't necessarily spend it all. You may save a portion of that for future endeavors within your own household, and that gives you the ability to do things without going into a huge amount of debt. So I just use that as a simplistic way of saying things, but in the business background that I have, I personally like that approach because it gives us the availability to do things that we've never been able to do in the city before. And I'm quite proud of that, as well as this council should be too. Okay, questions, where do we want to start at? Ladies and gentlemen, one thing I will say for those of you that weren't at the budget workshop, and Gary, it was 6 hours that we hammered slide by slide by slide and talked about a number of different things. And it's like, and folks have heard me say this before, it's like eating an elephant, ladies and gentlemen. you got much weight on it. It's something you just don't grab and all grasp all at once. It's kind of a refined process that we work through, but the strategic planning process really does work for us, and we got to continue to chip away on that. So.
No questions,
Catherine.
but I just wanted to thank Gary and the mayor for listening to having us sit at a round table and the department heads being there to talk to us about the things that their priorities as they came forth at the beginning of that 4-month process. Just knowing that thinking helps enlighten us on how you finally make a decision to put into the budget.
Thank you.
I asked a lot of questions during the workshop, and they all were successfully answered, so I've run out of questions at this point. So, given that, I would move to approve the ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, then it be read by title and published by summary.
Second?
And can take it.
Okay, we've got a motion by Art and a second by Ann, and before we get into that, other conversation amongst the council here?
No, I would have to agree with what Art said. I started with a lot of questions. That budget workshop was very helpful. I learned a lot in understanding the process, and have come up with questions since then that have been answered very quickly, which I appreciate. So thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, with that, Art made a motion and Ann seconded to approve the ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary. I will start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
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 Okay, with that, I will read the ordinance 2018-9. Okay, ordinance number 2018-09, an ordinance entitled the Annual Appropriation Ordinance, appropriating $85,843,465 for the purpose of defraying all necessary expenses and liabilities of the City of Moscow, Latah County, State of Idaho for the 2019 fiscal year beginning the first day of October 2018 and ending the 30th day of September of 2019, and allotting resources by fund for said appropriation for the objects and the purpose set forth in this ordinance, levying on the valerium taxes in the amount of $5,756,500 for the 2019 fiscal year, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from and after its passage, approval, and publication according to law. Okay, with that, now we will move into.
Mr. Mayor?
Pardon me?
We have one other item there.
Yes, we do. Sorry.
So I would like to move to authorize the mayor's execution of the L2 property tax certification in the aggregate amount of $5,666,358.
Second.
Okay, I'm not,
Catherine can have it.
Catherine's got the second on that one? Okay. Art's motion and Catherine's second to authorize the mayor's execution of the L2 property tax certification in the aggregate amount of $5,666,358. I'll start the roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 Okay. Well, with that, we will move on to item number 7, which is the public hearing on a 2019 proposed fee resolution. Gary, you have the podium, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm happy to say that we have about less than 1/10 the number of slides here. But again, this is a proposed fee resolution, as the council knows. If you are going to raise fees 5% or more, or if you are proposing a new fee, then you have to have a public hearing for that. Otherwise, we could just move forward with regular council business and vote on it. I don't know that there's been too many years that we haven't had a public hearing because fees change as rates are developed, so on and so forth. So we're going to go through those very quickly. You saw most of them in the budget presentation. I did it again. Okay, so land use and development fees, you've got adjustments. There was a year and a half ago, community development came in. I believe engineering was part of that presentation as well, talking about we needed to get the fees for services, land use and development fees, so on and so forth, to get them to where they were starting to offset the cost, the actual cost of providing the service. We are in the second year of that 3-year implementation, so you will see another set of fee increases next year. Bill Belknap made that original presentation. Council said, yes, let's go forward. This is the second year of that implementation. There's a new grading permit security deposit, which is 3% of the estimated cost of grading and excavation. So that is something that is new as well. Sanitation and solid waste fees, we've already talked about this. 3% increase for collection, recycling, dumpster, and mechanical. 4.4% for tipping fees, municipal solid waste tipping fee, non-municipal solid waste tipping fee, and commercial tipping fees. Again, all pursuant to the rate studies. Water and sewer utility rates, I think I got it right this time, Les. Water rates are being proposed at 6.3% per the 2013 rate study. Sewer rates at 4% per the 2013 rate study. As you'll notice, council gave us authorization to proceed with a new small commercial office with irrigation class. So that means that small commercial offices that have lawns and they irrigate are not subject to the same escalation of sewer rates, volume-based sewer rates based on volume of water used. We've already had some really good comments about thank you for doing that, and it more accurately reflects their impacts on the sewer system. So thanks to all the people who implemented that. Program fees in Parks and Rec, 5% is across the board for program fees. Again, as I indicated, the $1 an hour part-time and seasonal wages to help offset the cost of that and keep us competitive. That is the idea here. Hamilton Low Aquatic Center fees, 7% for that very same reason. There are a couple of miscellaneous things. Right-of-way excavation security deposit rates have increased 5%. Fiber optic lease rates have seen about a 4% increase. These are lease rates that we lease city fiber out. That operation is managed by the Information Systems Department. And farmers market fees, council looked at those, approved those earlier this spring before farmers market opened. So those have also been included. And that is it. Thank you. I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Questions for Gary before I open the public hearing on our fee resolution? Okay, with that, I will open the public hearing at 8:35 for the proposed fee resolution. Yep, come on up, Joanne. We're going to take testimony now. You'll have to give us your name again and address because this is a different public hearing.
Still Joanne Manita, 203 South Howard. I didn't understand the farmer's market fees. That's 2018, so there was no increase in 2019, because that's what this year is, right?
Yes.
Huh? I'm confused again.
Yes, ma'am. I believe that the farmers market fees will be looked at again at the close of the market season. Kathleen would probably know more about that, but farmers market is kind of offset by the costs. They don't really know what the cost the second year will be or the next year until they determine what their experience was this year. So I anticipate we'll follow that same process as we did last year. Which is they will be developed at the end of the market season, along with any program changes and brought through, if I'm not mistaken. Do you have a comment, Kathleen? Feel free.
And then you would have a hearing about that.
Yes.
So remember, Joanne, we changed
Talk in the microphone.
yep, we changed the fees.
Pull that down a little bit, Kathleen. You're shorter than Gary. Thank you.
Okay. I am.
Sorry, just.
That's great, though. But we changed the fees by use and the walk-on versus seasonal.
remember all that.
Yeah, so now they'll evaluate that at the end of the season and go forward for 19.
That's a good point and a good question to bring up, though, because anytime we have any kind of a change in the fee like that, we always have a public hearing on it. It's part of the transparency that we do throughout our city, so.
Yes, and there'll definitely be a process for that.
Okay. Joanne came up. Thank you, Joanne. Others would like to speak on the fee resolution? Okay, with that, I will close it at 8:37. And I will make a comment, this is kind of an interesting one. Our water fee at 6.3% Gary and I talked about this earlier today, and I did have a person ask me about why do we continue to raise our water fees? Because this individual likes to have a nice green yard, and I said, that's exactly why we raise it, because we want you to conserve. And we all get it, and this is something that we've talked about for a number of years now in this town. We need people to conserve water. That's why we have a Zeroscape, Wisescape, and other programs in the city that we have really worked on over this last decade, and it's really worked very, very well for us. And that wasn't incidentally the most popular thing to say, but it's just the flat truth. I told the guys, drive by my house and you'll see some brown spots in my yard, and that's just the way it is, but I'm okay with that. So, and that was point number one. Second point, we've got some cities close to us that have not been able to do that over the years, and they've found themselves in a deep pickle right now for the fees that they're going to have, those folks are going to have to sustain, and it's going to be kind of a tough thing for them to swallow. So as you do this incrementally, it makes much more sense. Council.
Yeah,
Jim.
I would just like to say that it's, as far as water goes, we need to be approaching marginal cost. We should charge marginal cost, or what it would cost to generate new water from a new source. That's what we should be approaching, because that's what the actual cost of that water is, and we need to approach that and encourage conservation of the aquifer as we go along.
All right.
Well, relative to the rest of the fees, we have to keep up with the cost of doing business the same as anywhere else. So a lot of the fee increases were associated with community development, and we discussed that a couple of years ago. And the cost of personnel reviewing plans and going through everything with a fine-tooth comb to make sure the city is safe and well-constructed. There are costs associated with that. So a lot of the fees are just making up for what the city actually expends in effort and personnel time in getting these projects addressed. Okay.
With that, I move to approve the attached resolution without changes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Catherine and a second by Gina to approve the attached resolutions for the fees of fiscal year 2019 without changes. I'll start the roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. And before we go on to item 9, we are going to take a 7-minute recess. Everybody be back. We'll reconvene at 8:47.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We will resume our council meeting, and we are on item number 8, proposed public art location C and Main Streets. Kathleen Burns is the presenter. Welcome,
Thank
Kathleen.
you, Bill, Mr. Lambert, and council, thank you. So I'm here tonight. I presented at administration, but I wanted the full council to understand this upcoming project for the Public Art Master Plan. So what we're talking about is C and Main. And this was identified by the Moscow Arts Commission and all of the cultural cafes that we coordinated with the public as one of a #1 location for public art. And there's some signs out there now with the construction on by ITD, and it's getting a little crowded. But I went out and took a little better photo, and then actually was on the island, and you can see the vegetation that exists right now. So I apologize for the lightness, but this is rated the North City entry at Main and C Street as priority 1 in your public art master plan. And that's section 5.5, which is the project prioritization. And this is the overview and map that engineering created. And it's a pretty narrow focus and a narrow place. But I talked to Kevin Lilly today, and he came up with an actual number of 388 square feet is what we're dealing with. Because some people have asked me, what size is the real estate? and that's the actual figure. This is a drawing from ITD about a base layer not being the base of any sculpture or installation. Cannot be higher than 36 inches, and then there can be a clerestory area, like a see-through area, and then the sky's the limit on top. So that's another drawing. So through the public art guidelines, one of the things that we identify is with the project is a selection and project committee. And those would be voting members. And when you look at the public art master plan, it's pretty definitive on who would serve. And so this would affect our street division. So I've already spoke to Steve Schulte about serving. Our city council member, Catherine Bonzo, is with our MAC, so she would be our city council liaison for the project. We've had 2 MAC members on previous agendas be nominated to be a part of the project, and that's Donna Woolston and Matthew Harden. And then we have a community representative that stepped forward, and that's Sue Scott, because that's kind of her neighborhood. And then we would reach out with the Idaho Transportation Department, and Jared Hopkins is the person who's the contact that supplied the drawings. And so we would ask him to serve on the committee as well. And then we would have some non-voting members, the arts director, arts manager, being the facilitator. And then I've contacted Elizabeth Graff, and she's a landscape architect, and she's willing to serve as well. And then certain city staff might be pulled in for technical advisory, which would be like engineering, the Parks Department, talking to Nicole about potential landscape. So that's kind of the beginning of where we're at in putting the selection committee together. So I'll leave that screen up. So if any questions come forward, in your backup documents, it's been put in the 2019 budget for a $30,000 project. That doesn't mean it's going to be $30,000, but the placeholder is $30,000. Usually these projects take about 10 months to put together, and so I'm here before you because the goal would be to do another unveiling of a public art piece for June of 2019 in line with Art Walk. So to get the selection committee to get together and design the scope of the project, to do the call for artists, to go through the timeline of selecting the artist, and then to go through 6 months of construction and on-site project management is about 10 months. So we wouldn't, with all the planning and the putting the project together, that would be before October 2019. But monies would not be expended on the project until the 2019 budget. So
Okay.
I'll take questions.
For Kathleen? Art?
Yeah.
Oh, just a recap of the one that I asked back at the admin committee. You indicated that ITD wants the tree that's growing there gone.
True.
And has anybody done any looking at whether or not there's a possibility to get that giant tree spade to grab it out of there instead of just sawing it down?
No. And I think we can ask the Parks Department, or, oh, Dwight's not
They
here.
fled.
Yeah. So I don't know what the size of a tree for a tree spade, don't
I don't know,
know.
but they make some big ones.
They do make some big ones. Yep.
So I think it might be worth just an inquiry about that, because I just hate to see a decent tree cut down just because to be replaced by artwork, which seems kind of counterintuitive. So I
Okay.
don't, maybe just
That's a good point.
ask about it.
I do know that in a different area, I was looking at some digging up some trees myself, and I do believe that the university has access to a tree spade. So you might really do ask that question, because I concur very strongly with Counselor Becky. I hate to see what I think is actually art torn down to put art up.
Yep.
Kathleen?
I was just wondering, I know that the subcommittee will probably do this, but just a general question, with the public art that's been in place with the terra seed, I don't know the proper name for that one.
Helioterra.
Helioterra. And then with the art at the library, is there an idea to have some sort of theme for the community or not? I don't know.
I think when you look at the selection committee, when we start meeting, that's one of the tasks of the committee.
Okay.
It was pretty easy to do the bees and at the library because they had already planted the garden, and it was pretty good. But we'll just have to see what comes up. I mean, some people on this selection committee might have ideas that we haven't even heard from. So there is a lot of examples out there, and I was going to put some examples in this document, but there's a lot of examples of public art in traffic islands, in roundabouts. And so when we go to meet with the selection committee, I'll pull a lot of those examples up so people can see existing public art in other areas and how they've done it. So
Okay, that's
we'll have a
good.
lot of homework.
Yeah. Thank you.
Lucky you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Other questions for Kathleen?
I'm going to make a motion.
Okay.
Your Honor, I move that we approve the location of C and Main Street and initial planning for a public art installation at the site in FY 2018.
Second.
Okay. I've got a motion by Gina and a second by Brandy to approve the location of C and Main Street and initial planning for a public art installation at the site in FY 2018. I'll start to roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you, Kathleen.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to item 9, which is Powers Avenue cul-de-sac rights-of-way dedication. Les McDonald. Les, you have the podium, sir. How are you this evening?
I'm well, thank you. So good evening. Before you is an item related to right-of-way dedication. When we are receiving dedications of street right-of-way, most of the time they come to the city in the form of a plat, or in some occasions they come to us in individual dedication documents. And so since it's outside of the normal platting process, we typically will bring those to the city council for acceptance as something that the city would like to have. So before us this evening are two dedications, both on Powers Avenue and related to the a school project that is on Powers. So to help orient everybody, Main Street here, the south end of town, Blues River Drive coming across, South View, and the Grove apartment complex sits right in here, and this little stub right here is Powers Avenue. It was originally part of the Indian Hills number 8 subdivision, which created the lot that the apartments are on, and the South View area, and Nursery, and Powers Avenue, all of that north of Blues River Drive. The Blues Prairie Charter School is going to be constructing a new facility on this parcel of land here. And as part of that, they went through some lot divisions, lot line adjustments, changes in the overall concepts of what was coming in the plats that were proposed for this area. And what was going to be an extension of Powers Avenue all the way through to Southview became a dead end with a cul-de-sac, and approved through the city council previously. So as part of the conditions that were set upon the development of the charter school were the installation of a cul-de-sac at the end of Powers and the dedication of additional right-of-way for that purpose. So what is before you this evening are two dedication documents. One is from the Blues Prairie Charter School for this hatched area here, to the east and north of the existing Powers Avenue right-of-way, so that they would dedicate that portion of the circle for the cul-de-sac. And then the second document is from the Indian Hills. It's actually the Powers family that still own this parcel, and they will be dedicating this portion to the south of the existing right-of-way to then complete the standard cul-de-sac right-of-way circle, if you will. And that then will become right-of-way. That belongs to the city, and within that, the school, with their contractor, would be constructing the cul-de-sac improvements in compliance with the direction of the city council and in conformance with city-adopted standards for streets. That is it. So questions?
Questions for the last?
Well, it seems pretty straightforward to me in obtaining the rights-of-way for the city, so I would make a motion to accept the rights-of-way dedications from the Blues Prairie Educational Organization and the Indian Hills Trading Company.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Art and a second by Jeannie to accept the public streets right-of-way dedication from Blues Prairie Educational Organization and the Indian Hills Trading Company. I'll start to roll with Brandy.
Aye.
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 Okay. Last, we'll move on to item number 10, Mountain View Grind and Inlay 2018 bid results.
All right, thank you. This is an item that is to a large extent a maintenance-related improvement that we are doing within the city. Part of what we've been seeing this past year has been a pretty rapid deterioration of road conditions in a couple of locations. And so as part of our pavement management program, we put together fairly quickly, and amongst all of the other jobs that have been going on this summer, a bid package to do a grind and inlay project on Mountain View. And along with that, we had an add alternate bid item for a portion of White Avenue. So I'll talk about what that entails. The Mountain View stretch is really essentially from 6th Street intersection, about middle of the intersection, south to the Joseph Street intersection here. So it's really along the frontage of the community playfields and the park, all the way up to the 6th Street area. Within this section, we'll be doing a grinding of the existing asphalt, fabric that goes down, then on top of that ground asphalt, and then a new 2.5-inch overlay over the top. This is not considered a really long-term fix. Part of the reason for that is that we do have a grant project for this very same stretch of road that is currently scheduled for 2023, assuming that all goes well with the granting agency and the funding that goes along with it. And so this really needs to get us through that next 5 or 6 years of use until this road is reconstructed and widened with that grant project in 2023 or 2024. So that is essentially what the initial contract was intended to do, is address the Mountain View portion that's shown here on the screen. But as I mentioned, there is an add alternate that was put with the project to pave the northerly half of White Avenue. This was a planned add alternate in that the White Avenue water main project that has been under construction this summer essentially tore up the pavement on the north half of the roadway in this area shown on green, from Blaine to about where the curve is heading down to the Highway 8 intersection. And we anticipated that obviously was going to have to be repaved. We did not include it in the original water contract, knowing that water contractors are not necessarily the best at giving us prices on paving, different lines of work. And so it was brought in as part of an add alternate for this project. We received good bids for it, and so that would pave the northerly half of White Avenue where that disturbance has happened this year. I will point out that in a couple of years, we're also going to be bringing the Phase 6 Southwest Sanitary Sewer Line project through this same area. So we'll pick up in this general area. Actually, it'll come a little bit from the west and through and down the south side of White Avenue to points east from here. So that's why we didn't do the entire road section as part of this. We just did the north half, and then knowing that we'll come back in a couple of years, be doing the sewer job, passing through this area, and we'll pave the south half at that time. So that'll complete that road section over the next couple of years. Okay. The bids came in actually in good relationship to the engineer's estimates, and staff is recommending that we award the contract for the Mountain View paving to Motley & Motley Incorporated with the add alternate for the White Avenue paving as well.
Les, is that north side that we're going to pave this year, next year when they do that south side, we're going to put that sewer line in, is it going to tear that new strip up that we're putting in?
It really should not. It'd probably be a couple of summers before we get to it, but the intent is that center line joint, if you will, where the saw cutting has happened this year, should be the same point. We'll work from there to the south with the sewer line coming through. So it should not create impacts to the north.
Another question I have is, how is this going to affect, or it either will or will not, the Latah County Fair that happens in about a month?
Yeah,
I mean, because are we going to have this done before that fair happens?
Yes. The contract is written such that this portion has to be completed before the fair. It's actually completed a week or so before the fair begins, so that we have time for the vendors and folks that are coming in to set up, whether it's for the rides or whatever, to have access through here.
I asked that question because there's such a huge amount of traffic during that
totally
fair.
is.
Yes, there is.
Okay.
I have a question for Les.
Jim?
When the other portion of the sewer comes through, does it go under Highway 8, or how's that going to affect the underpass project there?
Yeah, it won't affect the underpass because it would be on the other side of White Avenue and Steiner if we come across the highway there. The actual route is still a little bit up in the air. Originally, it called for that line to continue west on White Place to the highway, With the underpass project, we believe that is not a good route to pursue, so we've been looking at the possibility of coming actually under the highway near the intersection and then working our way either at the trail or near the trail and then crossing the creek here and continuing on. But preliminary work, but we've been looking at the alignment and the vertical issues, and it does seem to lay out pretty well doing it that way.
Well, just more of a comment that the Mountain View part, I think, is really needed because there's a lot of people that are driving on the double yellow line with one wheel or driving with the right wheel off on the fog stripe, trying to dodge the patches on the patches, and it just doesn't look like it'll make it through another year. Another winter is going to kill that one. And also, Joseph Street looks really nice outside the ball fields now, and to get to Joseph Street to the ball fields, people come down Mountain View there, and that's a terrible welcome to the brand-new lovely ball fields. So I'm glad to see that you guys have pulled this together really quickly, because I think it's going to be a great temporary solution until we get to the permanent one. So kudos to the department.
Well, thank you. The original grant schedule was to construct this portion of Mountain View in 2019. That's where the original funding was placed. And when we made some changes with the granting agency so that A Street would advance in 2019 in lieu of, in essence, but to allow it to happen, then it became necessary to do something with this one as an interim measure. So.
Okay, with that, I move that we accept the lowest responsive bid from Motley and Motley and award the contract for both the base project and the add alternate in the amount of $149,500. And authorize staff approval for construction change orders in an amount not to exceed 10% of the contract amount.
Well, I think I heard a second from Jim,
Yeah,
so,
about an
okay.
hour ago.
I was just having meaningful pauses.
Sure. Well, it's a.
This time of night, we're a little.
Well, and it's a mouthful. We got a motion by Catherine, and a second by Jim to accept the lowest responsive bid from Motley and Motley, award the contract for both base project and add alternate in the amount of $149,500, and authorize staff approval for construction change orders in the amount not to exceed 10% of the contract amount. Start to roll, Brandy.
Aye.
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 Okay. All right, we will move on to item number 11. We're getting to the end here, ladies and gentlemen. 3rd Street pedestrian bridge schedule. Les McDonald, you've got the podium again.
I'm still here. A few weeks back, actually 3 weeks ago now, at our last council meeting, if you'll recall, we had an item before the council regarding the bids associated with the multimodal bridge of 3rd Street across Paradise Creek. As you'll recall, the prices were very high, not all what we expected, and in the end, the council rejected the bids, which was also the recommendation of staff. Also at that meeting, a couple of motions were made on how to proceed from that point forward. And what we're here to talk about tonight is really looking for some clarification on how best to do that and to determine if perhaps there's some flexibility in the scheduling on at least one of those motions. So the first motion had to do with, it was a combination motion of rejecting the bids, but also then the second part was to proceed with the installation of a temporary pedestrian bicycle facility in lieu of the multimodal bridge, with a schedule such that we would acquire that structure, that bridge, yet this fiscal year, which is by September 30th, and then proceed with installation with the goal of completing installation by the end of the calendar year. So as we've talked about at committee, 2 weeks ago now, I guess, staff has looked at that schedule and laid out how that schedule could work. Very close to that schedule, I guess, that I think our ending date, based on our experience with the College Street project, put us about mid-January, so within a couple of weeks of that projected or desired schedule. The concern that we have, as explained to the committee, is that trying to do construction in December, when we are at the whim of the weather, and also the issues of trying to do final paving on approaches after the asphalt plants have shut down for the season, is a bit problematic. And so what we talked about at committee and what I'm asking about again this evening is the possibility of modifying that schedule under that motion to allow for a spring completion. And in that way, we will continue to push forward with the project, and we're making good strides on that already, but it also then gives us some flexibility as weather perhaps plays its role, and also in terms of scheduling fabrication with the bridge manufacturers, that type of thing, a little more flexibility in that regard, to allow us to work at a pace that we know we can achieve, and one that won't be hindered by inclement weather, if that is indeed what we have. So with that, we thought it'd be good to bring it here and see if perhaps there's interest on the council's part to perhaps look at a spring date. I would suggest possibly mid-May as an opening date target, with the idea that we would advance it as quickly as we can, making logical steps along the way to have it open as early as possible in the spring, but allowing us enough flexibility with potential winter shutdown and weather issues that may arise. Okay, so that was the first part. The second motion had to do with the pursuit of the multimodal bridge and a rebid. And the motion was to potentially look for grant sources or other funding sources that might be available, but also then to rebid the project. There was not a timeline set within that motion, and so what we're looking for this evening is some clarification as to how the council would like to proceed with regard to a timeline. The recommendation of staff originally with the rejection of bids was to proceed to a rebid late this year or early next year, with the idea that it's a better season for making such advertisements for bids. With the pedestrian bridge and the funding issues that revolve around our current situation, I think there's some question as to whether or not that was the intent of the motion, or if it is something that we want to perhaps accumulate funding for a period of time and then rebid when we have funding available. So some further clarification there would be truly helpful.
Okay, well, we've got 2 points, and I'm going to let Jim start on this. Let's start with the proposed schedule for the implementation of the pedestrian bicycle bridge. I think that's the first thing we should discuss, and then we'll come back to the second thing. So,
There was something that was left out, and that is that the motion to reject was a separate motion. It wasn't tied to the pedestrian bridge. That was done separately. And there was also a condition that was stated, the council voted on, that the project should be, or the bridge should be purchased prior to the end of this fiscal year in an amount less than $50,000. So that needs to be addressed as well. You're in possession of a memo that I sent to you after that was done, asking that, making the points that Les is making tonight. I don't believe the council needs to decide tonight on the rebid of the project. Council did say, and Art's motion that night was that he wanted us to continue to get grants and, if possible, rebid during fiscal year 2019. Again, the memo that I sent out indicated that, as I mentioned earlier tonight, we think we will likely have somewhere around $400,000 left in accumulation after all this stuff is done, the pedestrian bridge, that is. That's not enough to be able to go out and rebid in good faith. So I don't know that needs to be discussed tonight. I'd like a chance to put together some, sit down with Les, put together some longer range financial stuff and take a look at that. Tonight, I believe, at least in my opinion, if we can get direction on the bid schedule and the project construction schedule and get some clarification on that $50,000. And I think Les has some comments to make about the $50,000 as well. So I don't know if you're going to mention that, Les, or not.
Well, I certainly can. So far as we've been reaching out to bridge providers and looking at the type of bridge that we would need to accommodate the bicycle pedestrian multi-use and accommodate the maintenance vehicles that would need to be on it of sufficient length. We are getting prices that are over that 50,000 figure. They're preliminary. Some of them are right around 50. Others are as much as 70,000, and we're not sure about that particular vendor. Obviously, time will tell when we put the actual RFP out for the pricing to come back. And like I say, it varies quite a bit depending on which vendors we talk with as to what their actual pricing will end up being. Going through a semi-formal process, which is essentially asking for quotes or bids from 3 vendors, rather than going through the full advertised extended period, it's done fairly quickly. And so I don't think that that's going to slow us down any in terms of implementation schedule. And that way we know we're not going to have an issue with whether we're under or over 50,000 in whatever the final price ends up being from those vendors.
I have a question.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Catherine, sure.
Yeah. Remember how we keep talking about that this bridge would be reused again? So when you talk to those vendors about that, is there like a price for if the bridge was just a bridge that didn't go anywhere, or if what we're looking for, which is a bridge that then has to be retracted and put someplace else? Is that where the price difference is?
There's really not a difference there. The fact that the bridge it's manufactured at their facility.
Right.
It's then transported by truck in one piece, then craned into site onto the foundations that are set. That's how you install it initially. To then move it somewhere else, you just pick it up again and move it to your next site and start over. So really the structure itself has to have enough integrity to withstand that, whether it's a single move or multiple moves. So that really doesn't change. The one thing that does change, though, is the decking. And on the College Street Bridge, we did concrete decking, and it is poured in place after you set the bridge. So there's a pan there. It's like a big baking sheet that holds the concrete, and you pour it afterwards. Once you do that, you don't pick it up and move it again. So what we're looking at instead is a wood surface, a wood deck. It's probably a hardwood of some type that will hold up to plowing and all the various things that will happen with it. With that, that would be assembled by the manufacturer at their facility. They recommend it that way. So then it comes in one piece, and you can then pick it up and move it again to another site.
Okay, and is that okay? Anybody else?
Well, Jim had something,
Yeah,
I think. I didn't know
Well,
Jim wanted to.
As far as the scheduling of it, it can be in the spring as far as I'm concerned, if that's what logistically works with the other amenities that are going on 3rd Street. I understand that we're not going to get the bike lane done or any of those other amenities are going to happen next spring as well. So if it ties all together with that, I personally don't have a problem with advancing that as long as it's some date certain. And it's not some ethereal, well, whenever we get around, I want a date certain on when it's going to be on the ground. And if you say May, that seems like that's plenty of snow-free time to crane a bridge into place. So I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but I'm okay with that flexibility.
Brandy?
What, would you still follow the early timeline that you had proposed of getting the RFPs out and actually purchasing the bridge in this fiscal year?
Yeah, as much as we can, yes. That would be the intent. The RFP would go out this month. Hopefully we'd get bids back either by the end of the month or very early September. So then we can go through that process, select the vendor, and make the order.
Okay.
What then becomes the logistical issue is when do they fabricate, when do they deliver? Because if they fabricate early and it sits in their yard for 4 months over the winter, we're paying for that, all right? Or we have to bring it here and set it somewhere and pick it up again later with another crane. And just those types of things are part of what we run into from a weather perspective. And so the intent would still be, yes, proceed full speed ahead, get the solicitation out, select the vendor, get the contract, assuming they're looking for payment right up front before they start fabrication, make that payment. And that should be doable within this fiscal year.
My question is just how long does fabrication take?
It varies by vendor. Typically, we're seeing about 10 weeks as the typical response. Some of them are a little shorter, others a little longer, but generally about 10 weeks once you place an order for them to fabricate and ship it.
Okay.
The vendors that I talked to, it would be about 10 weeks from the time that you tell them what you want. They send you the plans, you get them approved, they go back to them, and they get it worked into their construction. They were talking mid-October to late October to have the thing where they could ship it to us. And then, you know, of course, at that time frame, weather's not really an issue if they could do that.
Yeah, it depends on where it's coming from, how long it takes to get here, and.
Yeah, but it shouldn't.
Part
you
of,
know,
part of
be
what
on-
we found when we did the College Street Bridge was the shop drawings, which are the construction design drawings. That we have to go through a review process with those, and they had problems last time. And so it took a couple of cycles to get those correct, because there are certain things that we need in order to make the floodplain work and not have ramps too high into the bridge, you know, with site constraints, which are a little out of the normal for the fabricators. They're having to set the decks lower in the structure than typical. And so working our way through that does take a little time. We built that into the schedule because we knew that was the case. So I think we're okay, and we'll you know, continue to move as quickly as we can with it. But I'm just concerned on the tail end, you know, that late November, December, early January timeframe, that we could have problems.
So I just want to understand the two, because it sounds like what Jim's saying and what you're saying are slightly different in time. So he's saying you know, like mid-October for delivery, but you're actually saying delivery from the time that the proposal got accepted, more like November. Is that correct?
Probably in that timeframe. I think in our
Was
schedule.
that because of the prep work less?
Yeah, with the
So
shop
the
drawings
difference?
that need to go through and make sure that that's all ready to go. And then they actually start fabrication and then delivery. And so it's that eight weeks, or give or take, with fabrication and delivery. So it's a combination of things, but roughly in there. And it varies by vendor a little bit.
So it appears to me like if we have no major problems with the design and the drawings come back and we get those approved, if that's in time and their production schedule allows us to get it in here before the weather changes, that we could go ahead. And if it looks like there's going to be a delay, that we would say, well, don't build it until March, and then, so they're not storing a finished bridge.
That
You know,
is
if
the
that's a
thought.
logistical thing that helps save us some money on it, I'm all for that.
Yeah, that is the thought, that, you know, as we go through the RFP process, select somebody, go through the shop drawings, then at that point, we'll know where we are in the calendar and can make that decision about, okay, do we start fabrication immediately with delivery, you know, whether, you know, it's mid-November or late November, whatever it may be, or does it make sense to hold fabrication for a couple of months and start it up in January so that the bridge shows up in March? Something to that effect.
So my question then is kind of for us, but then also for you, Les. If you said there's quite a range of prices, and we talked about 50,000 as this cap, is it possible or plausible just to consider those that are 50,000?
It depends on what type of a structure you would like to have and its functionality to a large extent. We're looking at a 10-foot wide structure, possibly a 12, but most likely a 10, so it would match the two-way bike lane system in that area. The length of it needs to be probably at least 55 feet, but very possibly 60. We're still working on that detail. I think the initial length that Jim was using in his quotes was, I believe, 50, if I remember correctly.
Well, I think 60 feet was what I was looking at, because I knew that the gap was more than
Was it
45
60?
feet.
Okay.
So, and was assuming that we would be setting it pavement to pavement and not want to do anything that would disturb the creek bed.
Right.
So the numbers that I got were based on a 60-foot span, and you could get them with or without deck, or, you know, a variety of things to reduce the cost that we could do. We don't need to ship wood from Pennsylvania for a deck. We can do our own. We got plenty of wood here, so
Sure.
we could probably get around that.
Part of the variation has to do with, we're looking at an H5 loading, which is a 10,000-pound vehicle loading, so that we can run a tool cat across this to plow. Because part of our commitment for the bike lane system is that we're going to be doing snow removal on that, and I don't know if that was considered in some of the earlier numbers or not. I mean, it's probably something that wasn't even thought about or asked about, and so whether or not they actually included that rating of the structure, you know, I don't know. So that may be where some of the variation would lie as well.
And then we have installation as well. What's your estimate for that?
Yeah, well, there's a number of pieces to it. Our model is simply what we did on the College Street project. So we have our geotechnical consultant already working on determining what the soil conditions are.
Okay.
They have the data from the multimodal bridge, so they're just assessing data that they already have in their system to then tell us what they think needs to be done for the foundation work, which if it's like the College Street job, we excavated down about 6 or 7 feet, backfilled it with crushed rock to create a pad. So that work was done with the contractor, and we're anticipating that happening again, and that's something that would happen this fall. The next step then is they have something called a sill, which is a metal footing, if you will, that is provided by the bridge manufacturer, and that can be shipped early. That is then placed on that gravel bed and filled with concrete. And that was done by our crews, our street crews last time, and that's the thought again this time, is we would do that work. That could also happen this fall, assuming that the weather conditions are conducive. And then it's just a question of, okay, is the bridge coming this fall, or did we decide to maybe have it delivered in the spring? Once the bridge is here, it's placed, welded onto that sill, and then after that, we have to do all the approach work. So that's all the subgrade work, gravel, asphalt, and, whether we're doing sidewalk connections to the ramps up to the bridge, all of that type of work would have to happen. And that's the part that would most likely be disrupted by weather and just time of year. Because again, the asphalt plants close typically mid-November. And if our bridge isn't here till about that time, we're probably past the point that we could get paving done, those kind of things. So that's the stuff that would happen in the spring under a more relaxed schedule, if you will, whether the bridge is set in the fall and just closed off and then finished in the spring, or the bridge is actually set in the spring. And that's a call we would make as we go and see how quickly it all moves along.
What's your estimate on cost for that?
Oh, for the approach work, we don't have one yet.
The whole shebang that you just walked us through. We got the bridge costed about 50. What's the estimate for?
We've anticipated 75 to 90,000 as kind of a ballpark. I might say 75 to 100.
In addition to the 50?
Total.
Total, bridge included?
With the 50.
Okay.
With the 50, yeah. Somewhere in that range. I mean, the structure itself is going to be in that 50 range, maybe as much as 60-ish. But then you have the approach work and the foundation work and all those other bits and pieces that go with it. So it's a combination.
Go ahead.
And in the
Brandy.
budget we just passed, there's 80-something thousand in there
Seven
for
or so.
the bridge. So good chance that
So we're right in
what's
there.
already budgeted for it. No, for the 19.
Yeah, the 19 budget shows what was anticipated to be a remaining $87,000 rolling over for the multimodal bridge. As Gary talked about earlier, the money is there, it's in the fund, it's just not called out. And so it's something that if we needed to deal with an appropriation more than that, we would have to come back to the council and discuss that at a later date. But yeah, the money's in the fund.
You have a question, Kevin?
Yes, sir. So my question has to do with all the footings and stuff. We move that bridge, goes to someplace else. The footings, do they get moved, or do we then just add them to, or do they become?
Those footings would probably be demoed, demolished and disposed of, and a new set for whatever new site we would have.
Okay. What do you anticipate would be the total cost of moving that bridge and installing it somewhere in a new location?
Well, we would have new site work to do, the new footing. I don't know specifically what those sills cost, because they're part of the overall bridge cost. And then crane operation to pick it up, truck it, put it back down, re-weld, those types of things. If I had to guess, I would probably say 20, 25,000, something like that, because you've already got the money into the structure that you're not replicating.
Okay. So,
I would say proceed with your research and come back to us with concrete numbers of bids that, or what kind of structures are we looking at? What are we looking at for, what's the least cost way to put it in there in a temporary portable way? And certainly, I don't think anybody's opposed to the flexibility on the timeline. No,
That's what I'm
not
hearing.
expressed it.
Yeah.
So,
Sound
but,
good?
yeah, proceed and find something that is the least cost way to get people across the creek.
Gary?
So is council direction then that we can proceed with a bid process so that we're able to see what we're looking at rather than the artificial, keep it below $50,000? Is that
Yeah, I'm okay
the
with it.
consensus? Okay.
As long
Just
as
wanted
it
to
can
make
be
sure
done in a
because-
reasonable timeframe.
We can manage the
And then-
time frame fine. I'm more concerned about the budget process.
And then
myself.
report back to council
Certainly.
in a fairly near future.
I guess
How's that
I'd like
sound?
to see it close to 50. I don't think that was an unrealistic number.
Well,
You know.
obviously, I've had at least 3 options that were
Right,
under that
Right.
number. So,
yeah,
That-
so I don't want to see a $100,000 bridge bid by any means.
No, agreed. I don't think Les is indicating that, but if we do have to get equipment across it, it's more than just a foot pedestrian bicycle bridge. It's a service bridge as well.
yeah, I'm a little concerned that we think we need to run heavy equipment across this bridge. It's 50 feet, you can do it with a snow blower. The ones I had bids on were designed for the snow load in this area, that they would, if you never shoveled them at all, the snow could be 10 feet deep, which would certainly be way more weight than that little cat. And certainly there's other, it wouldn't take very long to, I could hand shovel that in a half an hour, so I just don't think that's a concern, that we have to be able to run a D9 cat over this thing.
Well, we're talking about the type of equipment that we use, the Parks and Rec Department uses to clear sidewalks. So if you're going to have them running that tool cat up the bike lane to keep it clear, it makes sense that you just run it across the bridge and do the bike lane on the other side as well.
But if it costs another $30,000,
Certainly
I think
we can find
you can put some labor into shoveling the snow 3 times a year as opposed to putting that into a bridge just so you can run that machinery over that one little short piece. So,
Well, why don't we check it out? We'll put it out to bid and see what the difference is.
but I would think that any of the designs I had would have supported that piece of equipment.
And it very well
And they were
may
within the
anyway.
bid, so I think they're out, yeah, I think it's possible to do. It doesn't weigh that much.
Yeah, staff doesn't have any interest in making this come above 50,000. It's just the question is, are we going to be so close that we're not going to save any time through the bid process? The bid process will shake itself out. If we spec it, it comes back. If it's 50,000 or less, it'll be 50,000 or less. We're just talking about if the time frame is removed, we're able to run the bid process and get some choices.
I hope it's 50,000 with less instead of,
Yeah, me
that was,
too.
sorry, that was just a joke. It's late, I'm sorry. I agree with.
Randy?
So, thinking about what Catherine asked about with the portability, so it's not really that this is marketed as a temporary bridge. It's just one that can be moved. I don't know if it's not like you're saying to these companies, we would like a temporary bike and pedestrian bridge versus we would like a bike and pedestrian bridge to be constructed and brought over here.
The terminology they would use is it's prefabricated.
Right.
Meaning that it's made at their facility and shipped as compared to constructed on site, like you do maybe with a wood structure. So just the inherent nature of a prefabricated bridge is that you can pick it up and move it.
Right.
So,
Or you could leave it there.
or you can leave it,
So
yeah.
it's
But
just what
I
your
mean,
intention is.
the motion was for a temporary pedestrian bicycle bridge that could be moved at a later date. So this would allow that to happen.
I have a question, not a bad joke.
Okay.
Do they ever have bridges that are reused? Like somebody says, this town says, like with our fire trucks, we're not using this anymore. There's a bridge out there does that ever happen?
Occasionally, in fact, there was one here, actually, there have been a couple here in town that we've looked at in the past, one of them for this particular site, actually. And as it turns out, it probably wasn't long enough for what we needed. So, yeah, occasionally you do see them. There was a Washington State DOT bridge that sat out by the Green River for about 20 years in a field until somebody bought it, and they hauled it off. So, yeah, it does happen, but it's not like there's a marketplace out there that I'm aware of anyway that, says, hey, we're going to sell our bridges.
Well, in all reality, this is a reused bridge that we're gonna get. I mean, it's a new bridge, but it's gonna be reused.
But it can be
It's
reused,
The temporary thing is
We just don't know
minute.
how long temporary
No,
is.
Yeah.
it's a bridge that will be reused somewhere.
And then that bridge that you referred to that's too short, I mean, I imagine there's just no way to do something creative to make that work.
Well, the challenge with that one is it was in two pieces. They were, I think, 25 or 27 feet long each, and so you have to have a pier in the middle of the creek, which hydraulically is a mess
Oh,
for
man.
us, not something we'd want to try to permit.
Oh, they would have to go end to end.
Yes, but then you have to have something in the middle to support them,
Okay, got
so you
it.
end up with
Yep,
this column in the middle, and that doesn't work for us.
And then I know it's also not like very, well, I don't know what it would look like, but I assume not very attractive. But the whole railroad car thing, was that just something that was not under consideration? I know that was something that Jim had mentioned.
Yeah, that was in the list of possible sources that Jim had mentioned. I've worked with railroad car bridges in the past. They are more complicated than one might assume, because you do typically have to have somebody do a structural review on it and stamp it to make sure that it's considered structurally sufficient for the loads that'll be on it. Should be. I mean, they're designed to carry a lot of weight, but they're also used item. And then you have to design and fabricate and install railing systems to go on it as well, and then come up with some kind of a foundation system. So yeah, the initial purchase of the flat car system itself is pretty attractive, but they are more complicated in other respects.
There are a number of cities that use those. I know Portland has several of those.
Sure.
And so it can be done. I don't know if you can find out from them if they're willing to share information on what they've done and how much it costs, but
And we
There
can
are-
reach out to them.
and they look pretty attractive. So
Part of what we're trying to do is go down the course that will get us there the quickest. And that's where some of the prefab bridges are a little more straightforward in that regard.
So in following up what Gary said, we don't need to think about the bid. We can kind of put that on hold. And then for the multimodal, but then for this one, go ahead and proceed with the research, and then you get to report back with the bids, I guess. Okay, makes sense.
Everybody okay with that? It's not an action item, so we already discussed it, so I think everybody's got the
As long as
idea,
we've
right?
got a
Is there
record of it.
anything else we need to cover with it?
No, we will be bringing back, addressing Art's motion that the council voted on.
Right.
About rebid or accumulation.
That'll
any
be
of
in
that stuff.
2019. we'll be
Yeah,
dealing
we'll
with
bring you
that.
back a report on that and ask for further clarification.
Yeah, the only thing about that, about the rebid of the other one, just that the timeline be preserved, that the bridge that we unanimously voted to put in is installed before we start thinking about rebidding the other one. So there's not any sort of a little shell game that goes on there where that complicates or muddies the water at
Well,
all.
we've depleted the budget a bit with the acquisition of the temporary bridge, and so I think accumulating more capital between now and the next rebid, and also awaiting a more favorable construction climate.
Exactly.
All plays into it, so that is fine to push that on down the road.
Okay, we will move on, folks. I think that was the end of the agenda. We'll go on to reports. I'll start with you, Catherine.
Oh, I'm liaison to the Farmers Market Commission, and so I
Thanks, Liz.
participated in the Rapid Market Assessment with Steve Peterson and organized by Collective Phelps, and Jenny Ford was down there. We had 4 posters and asked people to answer questions on the 4 posters, and then hourly there was a count at all the 5 openings of the market, and people were totally receptive to doing it. It was super interesting. I stayed from 8 to almost 1, and I know that Jenny and Colette and Steve were there the whole time. And the next one is going to be on September 8th, and because they purposely put together the idea to make sure that the student population is back. But lots of excellent information. I had tons of conversations with people, and with tons of people that were from out of town. Just so many people from plumber or Lewiston and coming in from Washington. It was a super interesting day. So kudos to the Rapid Market Survey creators.
Okay. Art?
Not a whole lot going on. It's summertime. But the URA did meet and voted in the fiscal 2019 budget, and that was passed. And also approved going forth and adopting the policy manual that formalizes a great deal of the operations of the URA. So that's now enshrined as well, as it were. Other than that, we had the fire engine dedication last Saturday, shoved that new vehicle, it rolled in very smoothly into its slot in the garage and is now in service with the Moscow Fire Department. Other stuff coming up soon, so that's all I have.
Okay, Ann.
2 updates. Today, Smart Transit's hours were extended, so now on weekdays it's 6:40 a.m. to 7 p.m. and on the weekends from 8 to 4 on their 2 routes. And then on July 25th, P&Z made the decision, and there was some good debate around this, to shorten the time requirement for notifications for P&Z hearings on things. So there's 3 opportunities for input. People have 15 days. People need to give 15 days notice for neighborhood meetings. It went from 30 to 15 days for P&Z hearings, and then 15 days for us. So overall, the timeline has been shortened.
What was the rationale?
Basically that it's just quite a long time, and that you actually end up sometimes having additional time in there between the time it goes from P&Z to us anyways, depending on the month or the schedule. And so there were a couple people from the public who had questions about that, wondering if it was too short, but they had decided because there's several opportunities, and again, because there might be additional time built in, that 15 days seemed reasonable.
Okay, good enough. Thank you, Ann. Gina?
I have 2 commission meetings coming up this week, so I have nothing serious to tell you tonight, except that I go to the Tree Commission tomorrow and Transportation on Thursday.
Okay, Jim?
I have no meetings to report on until later in the month, so next meeting I'll have something for you.
All righty. Brandy?
Sustainable Environment Commission meeting. Steve did a great presentation. A couple things I noted here that were discussed was Kelly Cooper's report, doing some audits at the market of disposables with the vendors, just to find out what they're doing now. And there's going to be a recycling and composting pilot for 2 days, kind of vendor oriented, just to kind of gather information. An electric car event is coming up on September 15th in Moscow in the Rose Hours parking lot. It's like a national, I think it's a whole week. But national event, so things happening all over, and that is going to be happening in Moscow in the Rose Hours parking lot. And I believe there's another group that's also doing some event in Moscow that same week.
There's the police bike week.
Okay, great.
That I went over for, actually, and so trying to coordinate some events to do with biking. Pullman seems to be leading it, and they're going to put a poster together, and so people can send ideas related to biking, all types of biking, and family, or all types of groups too. So if anybody's interested, they can contact the Pullman Chamber.
And then I'm going to add a couple things onto the URA report, which is that 2 of the Alturas lots are entering a exclusive negotiation agreement with Alturas Analytics, so that would be very cool to sell those 2 lots. And also with the Southeast Industrial Park, there are 3 property owners whose property would need to be annexed, and one of the property owners does not want to do that at this time, so Bill will be looking at reevaluating the district boundary and reporting back on what's next there. Historic Preservation did not have a quorum, so we just had a nice little social time and went our merry ways. And the Sojourners ribbon cutting was happened on the 27th.
July 27th.
Yep. Mayor was there, and I saw Ann, and that was pretty cool, just hearing the story and all those people that stuck in there and didn't give up and got it back to that point. It looked really nice inside, and they had two folks who were ready to move in, I think, that following week. So it was great to get that up and running again. That's it.
Quick question about that. So the property owner, their hesitation is they don't want to be annexed, they don't want to be part of the city? That's the
Correct.
the issue? Okay.
Mostly taxes.
Gotcha.
Which makes sense. Okay.
I understand that.
July 19th through the 21st, we had the Regional Cal Ripken Playoffs at our new facility out there, and there was 500 people total for that. 180 players, 45 coaches, and about another 250 adults and family members and so on and so forth, from Oregon, Washington, Montana, and of course Idaho. I got a chance to talk, intermix with a lot of people. That it was a very, very well-ran event. And our kudos to our Parks and Rec department. They had the fields looking absolutely magnificent. Greg Morrison and crew, so kudos to those guys. July 25th, we had an airport board meeting. We talked mostly about a new terminal there, and there's the omnibus bill where we're putting in for funding for that, and more to talk about that as we go on. And as Brandy mentioned, on the 27th, we had the opening of the Sojourners. Brandy and Ann and myself were there for that. It was a nice function. August the 1st, we had a young professionals community involvement meeting at the 1912 building. Ann was there as well. That was kind of a fun, interesting night. We had all kinds of different folks. And I'm not going to get into these. I'm going to zip through these pretty quick. Let's see. We also had, as you had said, the fire truck dedication on August the 4th, which was pretty nice this past Saturday. And on August the 10th, we got the Mayor's Golf Tournament. So come on out and join us. The proceeds, what we make off that, is going to go to Family Promises in the Palouse, and so that should be a fun, exciting event. We'll have a good time. Gary, do you have anything for us?
I just, as a board member of the Moscow Chamber, I would like to invite anyone who would like to apply to the Leadership Moscow class. This will be the third class. By Friday, August 17th, the city has sent a couple of people to it. It's been a really good event. Trained people on exposing them to a network of individuals, as well as getting some interaction with local business leaders, government leaders, so on and so forth. So if anyone would want to participate in that, you can certainly contact Jenny Ford, the Executive Director of the Moscow Chamber of Commerce. So with that, I would just invite people again out to the Mayor's Golf Tournament. Great time, and it's a great cause. So hope to see people there.
I did forget one thing.
What's that?
The Arts Commission did the art affair at the Fairfield Inn, and I attended that, and for the first time, and it was super interesting. First time also in the Fairfield Inn, and then all the different artists had their rooms, and and the MAC had their own room, and it was really fun to see people celebrating and creating spaces that you wouldn't have expected in a hotel room.
I went to that too, and like there was one room that was all like plants and
Yeah,
the
Iris
bathroom-
Maze.
Many of the
Yeah.
rooms had the bathrooms decorated too with
Yeah.
whatever theme. There was like a fountain in the bathtub, and it just smelled like you were in a rainforest when you went in that room. It was wild.
It was really cool.
With that ending note, I would entertain an adjournment motion.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, we are adjourned at 9:50. Thank you, everybody.